Hi, welcome to the Second Rainbow Coalition Reading Group. We are reading The Young Lords by Johanna Fernandez. We're going to start off today with the Second Rainbow Coalition Statement of Unity. Sister Gabby, you've got the floor.
Right on. Thank you, Sister Zen. I'll begin reading the Statement of Unity. Let me just start screen sharing. Yes. Can y'all see this?
It might just be taking a second to load. It says Gabby has started screen sharing. There we go. There it is.
Right on. Beautiful. All right. I will begin reading the Statement of Unity preface, and this time y'all can see a full screen.
Right?
Preface. The U.S. was founded as a colonial settler state based upon white supremacy and slavery, stealing the lands of the indigenous nations, breaking every treaty made with them, and confining them to quote-unquote reservations, concentration camps. As the country became more powerful, the eagle sunk its claws into other nations, making war on Mexico and grab its northern territory, invading Cuba, Puerto Rico, Hawaii, and the Philippines, and either annexing them outright or making them colonies or neo-colonies. And in the 20th century, it became the major imperialist power in the world, exploiting both the people within its boundaries and those in every other country, bullying them with military interventions and robbing them of their right to self-determination. As Xi Jinping stated, quote, "We have two enemies to fight, racism and capitalism. Between the two, capitalism is primary. Racism is a byproduct of capitalism. The working people of the world, of every ethnicity and or nationality, face a common enemy that's destroying life on Earth. Our enemy is a small ruling class of property owners. Our enemy is a small ruling class of property owners controlling most of the world's wealth and resources. We must have our basic needs met to live a good and meaningful life: food, shelter, healthcare, education, freedom from the oppression by the state, and peace with other nations. To obtain these essential things for life, we must have the power to see to it that the abundance that is available is shared equitably." Statement of Unity for the Second Rainbow Coalition. The legacy of the First Rainbow Coalition dates back to its founding on April 4th, 1969, by the original Black Panther Party, original Young Lords, and Young Patriots organization. A number of other organizations joined this coalition not too long afterwards, such as the American Indian Movement, Brown Berets, Rising Up Angry, the Red Guards, and others. Since the founding of the United States, the masses had developed a number of popular movements that came together to fight against this capitalist imperialist system in various ways or on particular demands. Nevertheless, none had established a movement quite like the First Rainbow Coalition. This historic example, this historic movement was the first of its kind that established a model of class struggle like no other. Its charismatic leader, Chairman Fred Hampton of the Illinois chapter of the original Black Panther Party, stated that at the end of the day, we weren't engaged in a quote race struggle. He said that it's a class struggle, god damn it. By uniting with the various oppressed ethnicities and masses, they were able to bridge the gap between the various ethnic communities that white supremacy had long sought to keep divided. This class solidarity equipped them with the material basis and class consciousness to see their common class condition. Therefore, the necessity to form a united front against their common class oppressor, the capitalist imperialist ruling class. The ruling class viewed this as the greatest threat to their class rule, and subsequently used the entire repressive forces of the state: police, courts, jails, prisons, intelligence agencies, etc., in order to crush this emerging revolutionary socialist movement. We refounded the Rainbow Coalition on May 14th, 2021, with the intent of upholding the legacy of the original Rainbow Coalition. We believe that this historic example is the model for the United Front that will best serve our class liberation. By upholding the 10-point program of the original Black Panther Party, which was subsequently adopted and later expanded by the original Young Lords, Young Patriots organization, and all other original coalition members, Rainbow Coalition members, we establish our pragmatic unity. The 6 disciplinary rules that we uphold ties all organizations in our coalition to a common professional discipline. History has bestowed upon our generation a common class mission to fulfill. The representatives of the capitalist imperialist ruling class, represented by the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, cannot liberate us. It is their class intention and class interest to uphold our common class oppression. Therefore, it is only we, the oppressed masses of all ethnicities and nationalities, who must build the necessary class solidarity, class consciousness, organizational structures, and a united front that will ultimately liberate ourselves. This is what the Second Rainbow Coalition is committed to. This is the historic mission we intend to fulfill. Dare to struggle, dare to win. All members of the coalition, New African Black Panther Party, White Panther Party, Green Party of New Jersey, Poor People's Army, La Mesa Nacional de Brown Berets, NASL, North Alabama School for Organizers, New Era Young Lords, and American Indian Movement Northeast Woodland Chapter. The 6 disciplinary rules. Number 1, members will conduct themselves in a manner to bring credit to the coalition and will treat others with respect and politeness. Number 2, members will be sober when on Rainbow Coalition business and will not engage in any criminal activity while a member. Number 3, no member will engage in violence except in the extremity of self-defense. Number 4, members will not gossip nor be divisive to the unity of the Second Rainbow Coalition. Number 5, members will not act as informers nor work against the purpose of the Second Rainbow Coalition. And number 6, nobody is authorized to speak for the Second Rainbow Coalition unless authorized to do so. And that is a statement of unity.
Awesome. Thank you, comrade.
Right on. Oh, were you expecting me to record it?
No, I've got the recording going.
I'm sorry. I mean, were you expecting me to screen share the book? Oh, there we go.
Nope, I got that pulled up.
Right on.
Blow this up a little bigger though, make it easier to read. Oh, skip too many pages. I hate when it does that. Trying to scroll a little bit, and it's like, how about we scroll 4 pages? All right. Building the Young Lords Party in Puerto Rico. The organization's attempt to bridge the Puerto Rican experience on the mainland and the island began to be implemented during the first months of 1971. By the end of March, the YLP had transferred approximately 20 members and a significant share of its resources to the island. It hoped to establish 2 branches there. Central Committee members Juan Gonzalez and Gloria Fontanez flew to the island in January 1971 to prepare. Fontanez led the work. She had a stronger connection to the island than others and established contact with a longtime nationalist activist, Minerva Gonzalez, a relative of the young lord Carlito Rivera. She also fostered relationships with Julio, Luis, and Andres Rosado, major figures in the independence movement known collectively as the Rosado Brothers. These individuals had their finger on the political pulse of the different Puerto Rican nationalist groupings, domestically and on the island. Therefore, Gonzalez traveled between Puerto Rico and New York frequently in 1971. During the same time, the Young Lord Party began to adjust party activities in New York. The move required labor and resources and the largest fundraising campaign in the organization's history. The aim to raise enough money to defray the costs of room and board for members who would be transplanted to the island. 2 different spaces would have to be identified and rented: a large apartment for the group's collective living quarters and an office space. The Young Lords also had to purchase large ticket items, including a car for transportation in Puerto Rico and the plane tickets of those who would be moving to the island. The group needed everything: office supplies, furniture, clothing, and above all, money to sustain its organizing efforts for at least a year. By now, most young lords worked as full-time organizers and did not possess salaried jobs, evidence of the growing seriousness of many members. Therefore, the organization did not depend on its membership base to raise funds. The hard work of identifying and approaching external funding sources proved to be the group's main preoccupation between January and March of 1971. The YLP made a broad appeal for financial support through its broadcast program on New York's WBAI radio station and through various leftist newspapers. Liberation News Service, a new left clearinghouse for late 1960s radical politics and activism, carried the group's letter to the movement, which discussed its goal to build in Ponce, Puerto Rico, the struggle for self-determination of Puerto Ricans and other third world people. February was identified as the month of their, quote, economic offensive. The group's list of acceptable contributions included any amount of money, however small, food and clothing, mimeographs, typewriters, stencils, etc., food and clothing drives by supporting organizations and students, and speaking engagements for representatives of the Young Lords. The Lords also tapped into the constellation of old left organizations, a number of which were eager to gain favor and political ear within the new left. From one of these organizations, the Lords received a $10,000 donation that was later stolen. The relationship the YLP fostered during its campaigns at Lincoln Hospital, during which it gained the respect and trust of medical residents and doctors, also proved indispensable. Driven by a combination of compassion for the underprivileged community they served and strong commitment to the ideals espoused by the Young Lords, as well as middle-class guilt, many interns, residents, and doctors at Lincoln made generous donations. The fundraising campaign diverted the energies of the YLP away from its established routine and local campaigns, but the organization achieved its fundraising and relocation goals. During this period, the leadership also attempted to develop a hands-on perspective for building branches in Puerto Rico. However, at such a remove from the island, the task of understanding the relationship between the island's history and its contemporary political climate proved challenging. The Central Committee also identified the group of 20 young lords who were to move to Puerto Rico and arranged for them to receive intensive language training led by YLP members who are fluent in Spanish. By early March, members of the group began to land on the island. They joined forces with the remnants of the Nationalist Party, the significantly weakened party of the revered father of Puerto Rican nationalism and namesake of their predecessor reading group at the State University of New York College at Old Westbury, Don Pedro Albizu Campos. Their first action was a demonstration on March 21st, 1971, to commemorate the Ponce Massacre of 1937, one of the bloodiest chapters of the Puerto Rican independence movement, during which local police, under orders from U.S. appointed government officials, opened fire on a pro-independence protest, killing 21 and wounding 200. But by the 1960s, the Nationalist Party was more symbol than fighting organization. It had been racked by repression at the hands of the FBI and the island government. Here, got another awesome photo of Julio Roldan March in Aguadilla, Puerto Rico. Following the wave of nationalist protests that began in October 1930 on the island and the armed attacks on the Blair House and Congress in Washington, D.C. that followed in 1950. At their first event on the island, the Young Lords donned khaki fatigues and purple berets and displayed their usual paramilitary style in the manner that had become the imprimatur of mainland urban militant groups operating in American slums. Fittingly, the Young Lords used this occasion as the launching ceremony of their project. The march took the form of a procession towards the Ponce Cathedral, where the annual memorial Mass of the Ponce Massacre was held. The next day, at least 5 major newspapers in mainland cities where the Young Lords were active carried similar stories. All reported that the demonstration drew about 80 members of the Nationalist Party. The Puerto Rican daily El Nuevo Dia identified the same number, but accounted for the hundreds who lined the sidewalks, adding that the arrival of the Young Lords, quote, increased the tense atmosphere in the wake of university rioting 10 days ago, in which 2 police officers and a student were shot to death, end quote. A photo of the march published in Palante showed a much larger crowd, and the Young Lords stated that the procession had 700 participants. The Young Lords' paramilitary style display differed from what islanders were used to. Back in New York, the group's style inspired youth of color, who read it as a powerful symbol of political awakening and rebellion against their social marginality. On the island, such showmanship was out of place, but it underscored a haunting conflict among Puerto Ricans, born of post-war colonial policy. Juan Maria Garcia Pasalequa addressed the matter in an op-ed he penned on the Young Lords' island arrival. The well-known public intellectual was empathetic to the Young Lords, but noted that they evoked, quote, a mixture of hysteria and disdain among islanders. Their presence, he explained, was a retribution for first, migrants suffering in putrid slums, while those on the island looked the other way. And second, for migration's unacknowledged economic benefits to the island. Sorry, guys, I got an itchy throat today. I don't mean to keep coughing.
If you want, I could read it, if it's bothering you.
Oh, it's okay. I just had an itch in my throat. The piece was part mea culpa, and likely shared by a sector of Puerto Rico's managerial bourgeoisie self-conscious of its role in colonial migration policy, of encounters between Nuyorican and Puerto Ricans. Pasalequa observed, quote, as the conversation progresses, the locals begin to fret as they sense the distinctions rather than the similarities coming to the fore, end quote. To him, the presence of the Young Lords in Puerto Rico might help islanders grapple with these moments of collective guilt and tackle, quote, the very important question of what is Puerto Rican or Puerto Ricanismo, and what is the future of our island? He asked islanders to search deep within their souls towards acceptance that the Puerto Rico of the erudite Julio de Burgos is gone. He urged understanding for its replacement by the tough, down-to-earth proletarian slum dweller represented by the Young Lords. That's kind of cold of him to refer to them as slum dwellers. What the fuck? Back on the mainland, the group announced its plans on the island in parallel demonstrations in New York, Philadelphia, and Bridgeport, organized jointly by the Frente Unido, a coalition of radical Puerto Rican groups that included El Comité, Puerto Rican Student Union, Justicia Boricua, HRUM in New York, and mainland branches of Movimiento Pro Independencia, the island's major nationalist group. The Young Lords' groundbreaking presence in New York spurred the emergence or resurgence of these groups, and now its move to Puerto Rico was strengthening collaboration among them. Attendance reports for the demonstration in New York vary widely from several thousand, as reported by Liberation News Service, to the 7,000 figure reported by the Young Lords. Ironically, the New York demonstration was larger than the one on the island, where the MPI was conspicuously absent. Despite political differences, the MPI branch in New York was compelled to work with the Young Lords. a contending force on the Puerto Rican left with broad appeal among youth, known in the Puerto Rican community and notorious in public discourse. However, in Puerto Rico, where the Young Lords were newcomers, the situation was much different. There, the MPI perceived the Young Lords as politically untutored and adopted a scathing position against them. It perceived the group's political declarations as brazen, presumptuous, and dismissive of the national independence tradition on the island. The Young Lords' critique of the nationalist scene in Puerto Rico may also have discomfited the MPI. The largest independence groups on the island, the MPI and Partido Independencista Puerto Ricano, were led by the overwhelmingly white Puerto Rican bourgeoisie and petty bourgeoisie. Both had, quote, failed to sink roots in the most exploited sectors of the island, the lumpen and the working class, and among the most important social groups on the island, peasants and the Afro-Puerto Rican population, end quote. A week after the Ponce demonstration, the MPI's leader, Juan Mari Bras, welcomed the Young Lords with a biting opinion piece. Published in Claridad, it revealed competitive contempt for the Young Lords, and its mix of political analysis and paternalism portrayed the diaspora as helpless other. The letter denounced mainland Puerto Ricans, quote, dehumanized status as cruel and abusive, and likened their social segregation to South African apartheid. Mari Bras then pours paternalistic praise on the Young Lords for having made it out of the wilderness. Quote, what is marvelous is that out of this almost complete rupture emerges among ghetto youth a spirit of Puerto Rican nationalism, end quote. He chides the group for, quote, believing itself a revolutionary party simply because its functionaries have taken on the bombastic titles of minister and field marshal, end quote. More lambasting has followed, with a request to fall in line behind Puerto Rico's established nationalist leadership and movement. Quote, the Young Lords' error lies in arriving as great liberators, giving the impression that they will carry out a messianic function that will present Puerto Rico the magic touch it needs to emerge out of colonial stagnation. They are undaunted by 1 century of uninterrupted liberation struggle, nourished by so many heroes and martyrs, and more than a decade of new independence struggle. They have launched their project to liberate us as those who initiate a building project on a blank slate. The MPI welcomes our countrymen of the Young Lords and invites them to situate themselves within the proper political perspective and be mindful of their proper place. Only then will their presence be useful in Puerto Rico, end quote. That the lengthy editorial was written at all suggests a combination of pique and rivalry alongside valid concerns. The Young Lords chose Ponce as its base of operations because it was Pedro Albizu Campos's hometown and the Nationalist Party's strongest organizational base. Ponce was also home to a number of chemical and copper plants whose workers the Lords had expected to influence. But although the city was once the fountainhead of the Nationalist Party, in more recent years it had become a stronghold of the most conservative wing of the island's government. The YLP opted against San Juan because U.S. political influence and capital predominated there, along with greater policing and government surveillance. However, repression on the island was intense everywhere. To the FBI, geographical considerations were immaterial. In 1961, the agency redoubled surveillance strategies of, quote, groups seeking independence for Puerto Rico. Its new COINTELPRO program outlined specific instructions to informants in the Puerto Rican movement on how to disrupt their activities and compromise their effectiveness. Informants were instructed to meticulously gather information on leaders and rank and file members concerning their weaknesses, morals, criminal records, spouses, children, family life, educational qualifications, and personal activities. Its objectives included disruption and discord, creating doubts as to the wisdom of remaining in the independence movement and causing defections. Instructions also outlined the methods to be used. The primary means advised, quote, exploiting a common fault within independence groups, factionalism within an organization, end quote. And that's one of the things that we talk about a lot, just a little sidebar here of why that's even part of our rules and regulations amongst Panthers and a lot of the other organizations that we work with in the Second Rainbow Coalition is to stand against factionalism, because that's a COINTELPRO tactic to cause divisiveness.
Yep.
And there it is, in their own words, fucking admitting it, of here's what COINTELPRO was teaching people to fucking do,
Right.
is factionalism. Informants were also advised to raise controversial issues at meetings, raise justifiable criticisms against leaders. Well, in a healthy organization, criticism and unity go hand in hand together, and that's actually a healthy experience.
Exactly.
Not a divisive one.
But the thing about that right there is that that's how they managed to trick them. They portray themselves as bringing up just quote unquote justifiable criticisms that may hold some merit, but they portray it as massive disagreements when in actuality they were just nothing to begin with. They could have just been small disagreements that still might have been valid, but then they've tried to portray them as these massive things to try and divide and separate the party and divert it from its original purpose.
Well,
Right.
part of that too is the people involved in COINTELPRO didn't fucking understand Maoism, and that unity, criticism, unity is a core tenet of that. That
Exactly.
yeah, we absolutely do practice criticism, constructive criticism. It serves a purpose to hold each other accountable, hold ourselves accountable with self-criticism, and is a healthy practice to have. And the only time that raising criticisms is actually going to cause controversy or factionalism or divisiveness is amongst people who don't practice Maoism, who don't
Exactly.
practice these healthy things as a part of that accountability that is inherent to being in a revolutionary party.
Right. It's
Mhm.
literally a communist principle that you cannot leave out, because even with that they don't even practice communism either, because the large reason is they don't even know what communism is, even though it's been promoted to them to be this terrible thing. If you literally break down the word communism itself, it literally means commune. It means community.
Community.
By the community and of the community. That is it. So the fact of the matter is they want to exploit that fault that these groups have and make it out to make it be this huge uproar that was not even an uproar at all. It was just little petty things, but it's that weak spot that they always want to look for, so that they can make their move, just like what happened with
Exactly.
Panthers, just like what happened with the Black Panther Party. They did the same thing to them. You see it. You see what they've done. So the same applies right here.
Yeah. And the thing is, like, they underestimated the people, because that is only going to cause divisiveness amongst those who are ego driven, not those who are seeking to unify their community and serve their community.
Exactly. Unfortunately, by this point, the young lords, specifically the New York young lords at this point were becoming revisionist and going against their ideological and political line. Them wanting to go to New York and them moving their whole organization to Puerto Rico, and basically abandoning their revolutionary base that they had in New York and abandoning the Puerto Ricans that were already there already shows their them kind of abandoning their ideological and political line already.
Well, hold up, comrade, because them sending 20 people out of the whole party isn't necessarily abandoning anything. If you look down 2 more paragraphs, it dives back into the work being done stateside. So, you know, that wasn't an abandonment, that was them trying to expand. You know,
Gotcha.
and we also need to not make generalizations. Were there some members that were becoming revisionist? Sure.
Yeah.
I wish Comrade Shea was here today to be able to expand on some of that, because there are a few people who he has pointed out were doing revisionism.
Yeah,
but
same.
that's not a generalization that applies to the whole party either.
Of course.
You know, it's definitely applicable to specific people, but not the organization at large. You know, there was
Gotcha.
really, really solid comrades like Sister Cleo, who's still a solid
Oh no,
comrade.
yeah. Oh yeah, of course.
Who is, you know, part of the New York party.
Of course. To clarify, I wasn't trying to say that there weren't any genuine revolutionaries in the party. I wasn't trying to say that. It's just that from what they were describing here, it sounded like they were sending their entire organization to Puerto Rico. At least in the last chapter on Sunday, that's what I read. At least that of what they were doing, they were sending their whole chapter, their whole organization to Boriken.
Okay, well, a couple paragraphs ago, it had said there was like 20 folks that they had moved there. Joe, I see you got your hand up.
Yes. It wasn't a whole entire movement. They collected for a few select people to go over there. And I like the way they had mentioned that they try to do it. And they collected the money for them for their basic needs for up to a year to go over there. But I also heard in the book was where they came up with the New Yorkers versus the Puerto Ricans, like kind of
Yeah.
and then I'm not like, oh, you're a New Yorker, you're not a Puerto Rican.
Right.
So another thing I was getting back to, and hopefully we can go back to the paragraph before this where it said COINTELPRO and their tactics that they use using other community organizations to attack specific in a specific way and stuff like that. And that was so important. Like, I don't know. Oh, that outline those specific instructions.
Yeah, I'm looking for that part.
We could wait to the end or not, but I thought that was very very strong. Very strong putting it out there, and we should all pay attention to that and draw attention to that. I wish I knew how to screenshot that. That's all, comrade. Oh, there's a lot more, but that's all for right now.
That's a good thing to point out too. Like they were trying to tell them to subjugate themselves to the Nationalist Party, and I mean, even that line of "know your place." That's just fucking insulting. You know?
Exactly.
Yeah. Creating the divisions and stuff all automatically, just like they've done to us Chicanos in the South, where we're not accepted by the Mexicans, we're not accepted by the Americans. Like, well, who do we stand with when our heart's one way and we're born on the soil somewhere different? It's kind of like, I don't know. I just appreciate the way the Young Lords did send 20 people over there to initially start communications and working together on a community-based level. That's all. Thank you.
Comrade Andy, I see you got your hand up too. Go ahead.
Yeah. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Okay. Well, one of the things I think this brings light to is just the difference in the periods of times that we're living in, and the strategies and tactics that applied in one era, and what they wrought, how much they were successful and how much they weren't. has a lot to tell us about where we are today. And what I mean by that is kind of stuff that that we're looking at, and we're saying, like, how do we, in other words, how do we, the organizers or the conscious element, how do we become the shot callers of the whole movement? You know, this whole movement that's kind of a mess and a hot mess. But it's sort of like it is a revolutionary movement. Well, at one level, and in one historical period, you can attempt to lead that movement through ideology and, you know, having an ideological firm position. Well, when the time period shifts, that's no longer going to work. Like I had a friend, a mentor, and he said, when I was young, I was an ideological communist. And if somebody would have told me, you know, you have instructions to go punch the president of the United States in the face, he said I would have done it. You know, that was the mentality of that period. Now, what we've entered into is something quite different. We can see from the past that just being driven along an ideological pathway, we're not going to win. We're not going to be shot callers. We're going to be reduced to, you know, like history repeats, or history happens once as a tragedy, and secondly as a farce. We don't want to be a partial expression of what happened, the tragedy of say Fred Hampton, the Black Panthers, and, you know, these other things that have gone into, you know, another stage. They're gone. We have to come to grips with that. They're gone. But that the new period that we're entering into is uniting us. Let's look at that. This has never happened before. And that, to my knowledge and my experience, when I was in the left, we were all divided. We were all divided. You know, the white radicals were led by, for the most part, except for the White Panthers, were led by, you know, these really smart kids from intellectual backgrounds, red diaper babies, et cetera, et cetera. Each ethnic group was led by their own expression, you know. But now, why is it that we can actually unite? Because the objective situation has changed. We're all starting to look at this and say, we're actually in this boat pretty much together. We can do things that we didn't do before, and we can be guided not so much along an ideological regiment, you know, but by a philosophical outlook. So I see the day coming when we will fold our different uniforms and put them away, and we will disperse into this broad mass of people, and we will be indistinguishable at one level from the people. You know, on the other hand, we'll be able to influence them like never before towards a communist solution to the problem, because they're open for it. Let me tell you, the people are ready for it.
Right.
Not it wasn't like this in the 60s. You start raising some of this shit, or like the Puerto Rican, the young lords found out, you raise this militant Marxism, Leninism, Mao Zedong thought, you come to Puerto Rico with the berets on it, everybody's going like, who are these people? And old Puerto Rican friends of mine said, yeah, that was maybe not the best move. People in Puerto Rico didn't know them, and their whole life here, like a lot of them didn't speak Spanish, blah 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 blah. Those people look at that stuff and they say, what is this? And we have an ability today to do a judo move on this whole situation, where we don't fall into the traps that they want us to fall into, which are sectarian, nationalistic traps. And we don't have to do that. We can avoid it. And that's what's driving them crazy. That's what's driving them crazy in Newark. How come this Captain Africa has support from, white hillbillies from Appalachia? And how come he's got all these young lords, willing to support him, or American Indians? Or, what's this about? They're tearing their hair out because they want to characterize him as a crazy black radical. That's the way that they want to do it. We have the ability now to in fact, their whole success or failure depends on our ability to outsmart these motherfuckers.
Well said, and damn right, comrade.
All fucking power, okay?
All power.
All power. That was
All
amazing,
fucking
Andy.
power.
That was fucking awesome. 100% agree. 100% agree.
I think it's important to highlight there too that a lot of this, what they were doing then, was planting the seeds for what's happening now. If you look at what the New Era Young Lords are doing now, they regularly make trips to Puerto Rico and are welcomed with open arms because those seeds were planted back then, where now the people there know what the Young Lords are coming there to do, to try to help address the material conditions there. And it's a parallel to what the original Rainbow Coalition was doing here, planting those seeds here that now are blossoming and blooming in the second Rainbow Coalition as more people are awakened now and more accepting of communism, of actually organizing against the enemy state than they were back then. So these things are our foundations. They're very important and deserve that acknowledgement. I see a couple more people have your hands up. Comrade Joe, go ahead, and then Gabby, you'll be next.
Yes, I was talking about I wanted to refer to something that was before we keep on reading, where they wore their tactical uniforms and boots laced up and their berets. So they followed that military, kind of like militant, I won't call it military, more militant tactical gear. And it was in New York, it brought on the people to like, hey, this is something to stand for and stuff. Even I as a brown beret, I always wear my uniform to events and stuff. And sometimes, when we're going out in public, to just other things other than events. But what's nice is the reflection of the people that come to question, like, what are you about? What are you doing? And that's just an open format to like let them know what you're all about. But when the first 20 went to Puerto Rico, all suited and booted, they were like, well, what the hell is this? And then when they started talking about the politics over there, then they kind of got a little, scrunched up about that, those two organizations that they mentioned. And that's all I wanted to say before I forgot. I thought that was a good point.
Absolutely, because that definitely, deserves to be highlighted there, because people didn't realize what they were coming there to do, of being able to show them another path for revolution and to stand up against oppression. And it speaks volumes that these other two groups there on the island were immediately trying to repress that and go, no, get in your place, stay in your lane, blah, blah, blah. And it's like, wait a minute, why do you feel threatened by revolutionaries? If you are actually a revolutionary movement, shouldn't you want, there to be some new ideas brought to the table of ways to address this shit, but the fact that they were putting pieces in the paper out like that, saying, okay, well, we see these few good things, but fuck these guys for this. they felt intimidated, and they made it very clear. All they did in those articles, those quotes that, you know, were pulled in here from those articles, to me scream insecurity from those other organizations telling them to know their place, you know.
Yeah, like Captain, I mean, excuse me, Captain Africa, I think sent me a Facebook request the other day. So I think that's cool. And what Andy was talking about when we take what is going on from the past and we bring it, and even like in this reading, it's from the past, and we can bring it to the present, and how can we apply it in today's times? Oh man, like we're on school 101, like we're on a major course right here. That's all I want to say. So thank you, Andy, for all your input too, because I appreciate your words. That's all. Thank you.
Ditto. All power to that.
All power, all power.
Go ahead, Comrade Gabby.
Oh no, yeah, I was just going to I was gonna say that sorry about that. For some reason my internet crashed, so I unfortunately was not able to hear everything that Comrade Andy said. But I heard enough to where I said I 100% agree. And to comment on what y'all were saying about them being intimidated, a large part of it had to do was where they mentioned in the beginning, I believe, where they said that the National Party was led by the petty bourgeois. That it was primarily led not just by the petty bourgeois, but by the white Puerto Rican petty bourgeois, which was a major thing because once again, it has always been the colonized who have led the revolution, not the colonizer. It has always been the colonized people who lead the revolution. So the fact that the National Party felt offended by them, well, I mean, it makes perfect sense because these groups weren't some petty bourgeois labor aristocratic groups. They were actual colonized Puerto Ricans who accepted their African roots and who actually wanted to connect with the people within Puerto Rico, whereas the Nationalist Party still held a lot of I'd imagine, with the people leading the party being white, petty bourgeois Puerto Ricans. I imagine that there was a lot of racism, a lot of white supremacist beliefs among the Nationalist Party, especially with the whole notion of making Puerto Ricans be against African people and wanting them to ignore their African roots due to bourgeois propaganda and whitewash bullshit. So I imagine that was also a major thing as well. That the young lords coming were actual non-white colonized Puerto Ricans who are the ones that are going to lead the revolution. They're the ones that are going to lead the revolution, not some fucking petty bourgeois white people, but the colonized Puerto Ricans, the Afro-Taino Puerto Ricans who are going to lead the revolution. And so that was also a major point. And we oftentimes see this as well. In a chapter before that we read, and Shanti, you were there for this as well. We read a chapter where Osborne, I think his name was, Osborne and some petty bourgeois doctors were like teaming up or wanting to team up with the young lords in New York, and Osborne literally said he felt offended that as a white petty bourgeois doctor, he felt offended that he had to follow the lead of colonized people, and that he couldn't take part in the leadership of the young lords. He felt offended, and I feel like that's the same thing that happened here. The white colonizer petty bourgeois of the Puerto Rican Nationalist Party felt offended that the young lords who were composed of and led by the colonized people, were composed of these, and not of white Puerto Ricans. So
Right.
I also think that also plays a facet in it as well. I don't know how the Nationalist Party is today. I hope they've changed, and I hope that their leadership is
They're
far
back.
more diverse and far
They're
more
back.
composed of colonized people.
They are.
But yeah,
They are. As a matter of fact, I follow them. They have a New York chapter. I follow them on Facebook and on Instagram. They're back. They're
right
back.
on, right
So
on. That's awesome. That's
it's
awesome to hear. So
it's
yeah, I do
was
definitely. I'm sorry.
it's actual Boricuas, that you see, with the New York chapter. So it's look, it's not 50 years ago anymore. So
Exactly. It's not 50 years ago. Times have definitely changed. And once again, I still think that I still think that the way that they did things, how they tried to go to Puerto Rico, I still think there were definitely some faults in their procedure. But now, in today's materialistic conditions, it's far more easier to try and do that because there's far more connections between the Puerto Ricans organization and liberation movements here and with the ones in Puerto Rico, the island. There's an actual connection. They're far more they're far more in touch with one another than they were back then, as well as the fact that back then it was primarily led by white, racist, white supremacist, fucking petty bourgeois Puerto Ricans instead of Afro Boricuas. So yeah, that's all I want to say.
Yeah, that's a couple of very important things that you point out there. Um, the fact is, like, when it comes to any movement that is just starting out, there's going to be errors made in procedure and whatnot. Those are things to learn from. Even the original Black Panthers made mistakes that we have learned from and been able to adapt from in order to do better around now. And I see that no differently when it comes to what they were doing there. Their intention, their goals and whatnot were on point. Sure, there's going to be mistakes made if you have nothing to go on from anything previous to go, here's an example that was already led. The best you can do is try to meet those circumstances and conditions where you're at the time. And so, the new era Young Lords now have those things to learn from and build from, and are doing phenomenal when it comes to the work that they're doing on the island. And the other factor that you pointed out, thank you for highlighting that, because yeah, the nationalist groups on the island that were calling them out and trying to be confrontational with them definitely gave white nationalist vibes there, big time.
Yeah.
Of like that attitude of entitlement of like, how dare these Afro-Tainos come here and try to help organize, when us white petty bourgeoisie fucks are already doing it. It's important to keep that in mind, because a lot of people don't realize that colorism is an effect that's happened in every area that's been colonized all over the fucking planet.
Yep, everywhere.
And it was
Every-
definitely a facet happening there. Just even given that attitude that those nationalist parties were given, you can tell that it comes from that false sense of entitlement, that they're like, how dare you, and even, the false sense of entitlement you referred to in those, white doctors here that were offended at the idea of following the leadership of non-whites. And it's like, fucking get over yourself.
Exactly. Like you're either for revolution or you're against it, because once again, because once again, those Puerto Ricans, I've said before and I've said again, we have to combat all the contradictions of capitalism. You cannot just ignore, you can't just focus on the economic aspects and leave out the social aspects, the political aspects, the cultural aspects. You can't leave it out. You can't separate capitalism from racism, from misogyny, from ableism, from queerphobia. You can't. They're interlinked. They're intertwined. They're a byproduct of capitalism. So once again, how the hell were the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico of that time, who were primarily composed of white, petty bourgeois Puerto Ricans, how were they going to lead the revolution against racism? How?
Right.
How are you going to do that? How are you going to lead a revolution against racism when you've never been oppressed by it? It makes no sense. You can't.
How were they even going to lead anything against classism when they were part of the upper class themselves?
Exactly.
The bourgeois class, like that's literally the whole point. And also keep in mind that this is post Campos.
Yes.
So this is like after Pedro Albizu Campos, like after Campos's death and neutralization. The so-called white petty bourgeois folks came in and became the new faces of the party. Mind you, it was an Afro-Dino person that became the first president of that party. So that's another thing to keep in mind, is that after Campos and after I think they've made the whole island turn against Campos through propaganda and with McCarthyism and all of that, the petty so-called white bourgeoisie became the new faces of the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico, as if they are the true vanguard of Puerto Rican. Like, they can be able to free the island. And then when they saw these Afro-Tainos come back to their homeland, and mind you, do I have criticisms about their move to Puerto Rican, like in the manner that they did? Yes, but they did make one thing clear. They did do one thing right. They were making the people of Puerto Rican, largely Afro-Tainos, see their destiny again. They were intimidated and scared because they haven't seen anything like that in so long, and they've been so tainted with so much propaganda from the United States government that this group of young Afro-Dino children and youth were coming back and doing what they were usually did. I don't think they've seen anything like that in forever since Campos's involvement with the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico and the other independence movements on the island, because once again, the political repression that had happened on the island that made the conditions much worse on the island, especially with the fascist right wing dominant scope on the island. So that's another thing to keep in mind. Like the fact that they saw young Afro-Tainos come in the way that they did, with 20 people. Now I can't give them credit for that. 20 people, that's plenty enough.
That's way better. That's way better than what I thought they were doing.
Yeah, that's plenty enough people, to send to your homeland. And the fact that they saw this group of young Afro-Tainos like that, they never seen anything like that in a long time, especially with all the propaganda that they have been forced down their minds, and having them turn against Campos with all this propaganda. Like, I think that was the seed that was definitely needed, ironically, because even though it may have bombed, that was that very important seed to put in there. These Afro-Tainos challenging the white bourgeois status quo in these independence movements at the time. They did something right with that. They did
right on
that. I can't give them credit for that.
Right on. Ooh,
It also shows the importance of getting people who are in those positions to actually commit class suicide. that, like, yeah, we definitely want to revolutionize the minds of some of these labor aristocracy and petty bourgeoisie and get them to commit class suicide. But there still has to be some modicum of fucking self-regulation coming to the table there, of them not presuming that just because they are a doctor or just because they are white, that they're going to be ushered in and anointed to a position of power within the movement, when really what they need to do is actually learn from the people who've been oppressed by classism, by racism, by sexism, all these other facets that feed capitalism, and learn from those experiences so that they can actually
know
grow
what
and fully commit that class suicide.
right
Exactly.
doing.
Exactly. Oh, I also just wanted to add one thing. When it came to, and then Andy can go. When it comes to the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico during that time, they haven't gone over this, and I don't know if they will go over this. But another facet to also consider is that the Young Lords at this time were also a Maoist organization, correct? They were Maoists. Because there's one thing that revisionists absolutely hate about Maoism. And you want to know what it is? Cultural revolution. They hate it. They absolutely hate it. They absolutely hate cultural revolution because it involves uprooting and purging that reactionary sentiment, racism, misogyny, ableism. It involves psychologically decolonizing people and actually allowing them to see how things can be better and how revolution will play out and have them adapt a critical, dialectical, and principled analysis. The petty bourgeois who were leading that nationalist party, they revised it. They were revisionists. That's what they fucking did. They portrayed themselves as the vanguard of the party and portrayed their actions and their ideological and political line as the revolution, as the true revolutionary ideology. When actuality they were merely giving lip service to Marxism. They were actually they were only giving lip service to Marxism. They portrayed themselves as if they were the ones that were engaging in true revolutionary action, when in actuality they were distorting, twisting, and
destroying Campos's name.
Exactly. Destroying Campos's name, destroying how to actually apply revolution, destroying how to actually apply a dialectical and synthetic analysis on the internal contradictions and materialistic conditions of Puerto Rico. They were distorting it and portraying and giving lip service to Campos, when in actuality they were whitewashing him and the original ideological and political line of the party and of praxis. That's what they were doing. And
that's what they were doing. But now it's, it's more acceptable. There's more actual Afro-Latino faces in the Nationalist Party now, especially with the New York chapter. So like a lot has come a long way from that, a long way, and a long hard fight to get to this point. And fact of the matter is that the fact that they were literally destroying Campos's name when the U.S. government already destroyed it, but the infiltration by the petty bourgeoisie into this party and destroying what Campos really entailed in his prime was really it was really, really destructive. And once again, they were literally trying to revise history, revise the whole point of the Nationalist Party, and literally reinforcing that racist aspect within the party. And back then, you saw the result of what happened with that. But thankfully, it come a long way, and Boricuas from the island and in the diaspora are finally starting to be way more accepting of these independence movements, that they indeed have the right agency and the right to, to be a part of and lead.
Absolutely. Well said. Comrade Andy, I see you got your hand up, and after you, we'll dive back into the reading.
Oh, okay. I'll try and make it brief. The cultural scene here, like in Chicago, in regards to the different aspects of Puerto Rican national culture and stuff like that. They make a lot of noise about it. It's largely confined to everything that doesn't have to do with property values. In the, I mean, I know Puerto Ricans in both sides of the fence on the national question or the revolutionary question. I know people that are wildly successful business people here, wildly successful cultural people, won Grammys and stuff like that. There's a you couldn't call that this cultural expressions that are existent in Chicago, the ones that are from the Chicano movement or Puerto Rican movement, or any movement. Go the Polish movement. There's all these culture remnants here, but there's not like a healthy working class cultural movement going on here. And that's partly because the people who are holding the reins and who are sitting on top of all the resources, that's the last thing in the world they want. They want to own and control property, see that property go up in value, put on the occasional ballet folklorico or whatever, but they don't want to challenge the property relations, so that the poor people of the city of Chicago who are from Puerto Rican background are still suffering, and getting worse. And the same goes for the people of Mexican heritage or African American heritage. They never catching no break in this whole thing. I mean, one of my contacts is she's a successful alderman here. She was a theater director. She got all these kids full rides to Harvard on her theater program. Now she's an alderman, making $107,000 a year. She's still, nice person, ostensibly, a real revolutionary, but she's not she's hamstrung as a political figure within the system. I guess that's what I'm saying. A lot of these people that you see, that hard not to like them. They got all the trappings of being a good cultural person, good revolutionary person, but they are unable to mount an offensive against property values and private property. See, and that's actually the next step. That's the only next step there is for the poor, for the working class people who are living in tents, living in slums, living under the viaducts, watching their kids be, deprived. All those people, is sort of like they get thoughts and prayers. A lot of other people who are in the, the head of the pack of people who are like succeeding in the Puerto Rican diaspora here, but they're disconnected completely. They can't, even if they wanted to, they can't challenge property values. I'm not making excuses for them. I'm just saying the only thing that's going to make this breakthrough will be the organization of the working class people themselves, who will go to those alderman office and say, look, we're done playing. You're going to open up this building. You're going to open up this church. You're going to put these homeless people in it, or there's going to be major trouble. See, I have friends who did that back in the day. That's the way they ran it. I have friends who were with Cha-Cha when they took over the McCormick Center, and these people had all these plans, and they said, well, we don't see no brown people in the room. We don't see no brown people in your plans. So there ain't going to be no plan. There ain't going to be no nothing. And they tore it up. Well, we don't have that going on here. We don't have anything close to that going on right now. But I'm suggesting to you all that that's what's coming, because the nationalists or the people that are well placed politically, they, even if they wanted to do something, they can't hardly do something. They can't hardly do a thing. So they're resigning themselves. Well, we're going to do what we can. Well, what they can is feather their own nest and advance their own political career. So that's what they're doing.
Yeah, precisely. Like, even if someone has those revolutionary desires in mind, the minute you become part of the system by even taking one of those jobs on a local level, you tie your own hands, you pull out your own fangs, and, become impotent to a certain extent when it comes to your ability to enact anything that is actually revolutionary, because you are now confined to those limitations of revisionism, you know.
Mm-hmm.
Exactly. It's the same way it's the same way how these politicians think that they can cause change by being a part of the system. Like, no, by you being a part of the system, you tie your hands. You can't do anything, because if you try and do anything, you're gonna get your ass killed. You're gonna be discarded and replaced.
Yeah, that's all the system does.
I have this old Puerto Rican friend, and he says he started a group, a Puerto Rican voters group. He said, we never elected a corrupt person. We always elected a good person. They became corrupt the moment they got in office.
Yep. Yep, that's the only option that you have once you're in there, is, become corrupt right along with it, because you're getting your paycheck and your ability to keep your roof over your head and food on your table from the corrupt system. Comrade Joe?
Yes, that's a good point that Comrade Andy made. That's what I was thinking to myself when he talks about even the police, even the street police that infiltrate our inner communities all the time. They say on the side of their car it says to protect and serve, but it's to protect and serve who? It's to protect and serve the property owners and the businesses. It's not for the peoples. So that's a very good point right there that I was thinking about. And I had a couple other things I wanted to say too, but like I got forgetful because I like to listen. But I guess even us in our communities. So that I was saying, like, we don't have to rely on that. Have to call 911. We should be able to self-sufficiently handle our own scandal at a whim's note, so we don't have to even rely on that. And I think that's going to be strength right there within ourselves. That's all. Thank you.
Absolutely. All power. All right. On that note, we can dive back into the rest of the reading here, because we still got quite a few pages left to go. As in the experience of the CPUSA, the instructions continued. This method could lead the informant to advance the party or advance inside the party, primarily because of their forceful acts and criticizing poor leaders and other weaknesses in the party organization. Additionally, the memo suggested that, quote, the nationalist element could be pitted against the communist elements, end quote, More divisiveness bullshit there. Finally, the instructions explain the effectiveness of psychological methods in which, quote, seeds of suspicion are planted concerning the real motivation, end quote, of the group's leaders and individuals. The Young Lords were also infiltrated and surveilled by COINTELPRO and by police departments in New York, Newark, Philadelphia, and Bridgeport. Police in Puerto Rico also kept close watch on the group, and informants documented every detail of their movements, including air travel times, dates, and flights. Administrators of the program also recruited postmasters who allowed them to intercept the mail of the organization in New York, Philadelphia, and elsewhere. That's a fucking federal felony right there, to intercept somebody else's mail. That's mail fraud. Anyway, and paid close attention to individuals who contacted the organization, particularly those in prison with early release dates who would provide excellent targets for informant material. That's pretty fucked, trying to catch people up in some shit like that, if anything, could just land them right back in fucking prison, you know? God, this system's fucking dirty. While government provocateurs watched them relentlessly, the Young Lords went through 2 months of hard, fruitless work in Ponce. In late May 1971, they began to build a branch in Aguadilla, a small city on the northeastern quadrant of the island, approximately 90 miles from the capital. 6 months later, they would open a second branch in El Caño, a very depressed neighborhood within San Juan. Aguadilla was a small, poverty-stricken city with a high unemployment rate and an isolated population dependent on one hospital and one factory for work. Given these conditions, the Lords hoped that Aguadilla might better mirror New York's social environment. Though the gulf between a small town in Puerto Rico and New York's inner city was vast, the Young Lords worked hard and found some receptivity. As a tightly knit town, still very much like a rural community, Aguadilla erected its social life on folk and kinship networks. Neighbors had frequent direct interaction with each other, and respected individuals could influence the town. The work of the Young Lords was made immeasurably easier as a result of a tragic but advantageous connection with those deep-seated networks. Aguadilla was Julio Roldan's hometown. Even before their arrival in this small town, these mainland radicals had achieved a measure of honor and standing as fighters against injustice. Aguadilla had hosted 6 months earlier an impassioned political funeral procession for Roldan of over 1,000 people. The funeral ceremonies concluded with speeches by Roldan's family and friends, as well as representatives of the Young Lords and the MPI, all of whom linked his death to police brutality in New York and U.S. rule over Puerto Rico. In the months after their arrival, the Young Lords' work in Aguadilla focused primarily on stopping the closure of the city's only hospital due to budgetary constraints. Given the group's health activism in New York, this was familiar political territory. The implications of the hospital closure were quite grave. Those seeking medical care in Aguadilla and its greater area would have to travel an hour to the next closest hospital in the city of Mayagüez. The Young Lords held a rally in April, which, according to Juan Gonzalez, quote, got 200 people, which for a small town is pretty good, end quote. The hospital closed soon thereafter, but reopened through pressure organized by the Young Lords, who built an alliance of community members and hospital workers. It closed permanently within a year after protests subsided. The victory was significant, however brief, but the organization still did not grow. In El Caño, the fruit of the YLP's work was even less visible than in Aguadilla. The major campaign in that city sought to halt an urban renewal initiative. Introduced by the Model Cities program, the project introduced middle-class housing to diversify the class base of poor neighborhoods and spur economic development. This was known territory. When thousands of poor urban residents were displaced, the Lords identified the main bureaucrats behind the Model Cities program and targeted them with demonstrations when they came to town. They also organized a number of protests that blocked construction work. The Lords in El Caño frequently likened their experience to that in East Harlem. The ramshackle neighborhood on the outskirts of the Puerto Rican capital actually had a higher incidence of poverty and was more akin to the poorest of towns in the U.S. South. Despite the familiarity they found in El Caño, their efforts were too isolated to arrest the National Urban Renewal Initiative. The hard work of the Young Lords in Puerto Rico wound up amounting to little growth. There was no significant success, symbolic or otherwise, that might have increased their membership base or reputation and influence among potential sympathizers on the island. Most important, the Young Lords working in Puerto Rico were very aware of the great discrepancy between the drudgery of their unproductive work and progress towards their identified goal, Puerto Rican independence, a reality that produced profound demoralization among them on the island. It was clear, especially to those in Puerto Rico, that the YLP had failed to create a plan that fit both its organizational perspective and Puerto Rico's social and political climate. Rather, along with the transplantation of a few of their members, the Young Lords had transplanted a method of organizing that had been effective in politicizing an isolated racialized group on the mainland, but didn't work in the island context. The group was handicapped by a number of obstacles. Palante, the sale of which was the mainstay of Young Lord organizing, rarely arrived on schedule because the New York Lords had difficulty getting the copies to JFK Airport since they had to pick up the paper in Worcester, Massachusetts. According to Ramon Morales, quote, "We had to go far away because the FBI and NYPD intimidated local companies not to print Palante," end quote. Even as they had grand dreams for Puerto Rico, the Young Lords were already overstretched on the mainland, their resources spread across 6 branches. Their bank accounts were low, they owed rent, and they were behind on payments to the printer for Palante. Though it wasn't obvious then, sometime around February 1971, the organization's membership started to decline. As a result, at the very time the Young Lords were trying to spread their operations, they had fewer bodies to address the many disparate needs that the group faced. On a number of occasions, monetary subsidies designated for the Puerto Rico branches did not arrive on time, and the Young Lords on the island went without basic necessities, including food. For its part, the state continued to ramp up its repressive mechanisms. In small town Puerto Rico, just going to the Young Lord's office to ask for literature might mean you would lose your job. That's fun. Perhaps the greatest challenge was the group's lack of facility with Spanish, the island's dominant language. The group was also thwarted by its political inexperience. While the study of history was important to the project of building a branch in Puerto Rico, the application of political lessons derived from this history to contemporary conditions proved to be a more complicated matter. The latter required a keen understanding of contemporary politics through theoretical study, political debate, and most importantly, practice and learning through political engagement in diverse settings over time. Though the Puerto Rico members were sincere in their desire to sharpen their understanding, they had little time to learn and no established community from which to do so. Question. Sister Shanti, you haven't taken a turn reading in a while. Would you like to take over from here?
Yes.
Awesome. Right there.
All right.
Please and thank you.
Of course, comrade. While the Young Lords had made grave mistakes, lessons were being learned. Of the organization's experience in Puerto Rico and shift away from lumpen organizing, Gonzalez explained during the period, quote, "If you're going to build a revolution, it has to be based on, or at least given direction by, the main force, which is Puerto Rican working people. It takes a long time to build a revolution unless you're talking about a coup, unless you're talking about a few people seizing power in a society. And if you do that, you don't have a revolutionary people. You just have a few revolutionaries." Very important to note here. Back in the mainland United States, the work of the organization floundered as the YLP's sharp turn towards organizing in Puerto Rico seriously depleted its resources and the morale of its members. Some who weathered the shift during the first months of the move to Puerto Rico functioned primarily as auxiliaries for the new Puerto Rico-based branch of the organization. In the first few months of 1971, most of the group's focus was on preparing for the expansion to the island, and then in the few months thereafter, it focused on continuing to raise money. Throughout, a more intense course of study in the history and politics of the island was mandated by the Central Committee. The departure of Denise Oliver was among the major losses of the period. In late March, she resolved her quiet reservations about the move to Puerto Rico by quitting the YLP and joining the Harlem chapter of the BPP, which was embroiled in its own internecine turmoil, one fueled by the FBI. The month before, in February, the long-standing ideological divide in the organization came to a head. One faction was led by the then exiled Panther leader Eldridge Cleaver. The other faction was led by Bobby Seale and Huey P. Newton, supported by the Oakland headquarters and members on the West Coast. Cleaver opposed what he characterized as the reformist tendencies of Newton, whose ideas and program had become dominant in the organization. In response to widespread violent state repression against the BPP, Cleaver favored the development of a strong guerrilla underground organization. He critiqued Newton's focus on political education, legal defense, and, quote, survival programs that had constituted the core of the group's social service work, and which had been a model for the Young Lords, a free breakfast program for children, ambulance service, and lead testing. Newton, for his part, opposed tendencies toward what he saw as militarization because he believed the community would not support an emphasis on guns. Ironically, within a month of joining the Panthers, Oliver also went in search of more revolutionary pastures abroad. She flew to Paris and then to Algeria, joined Eldridge Cleaver and his wife, Kathleen, and the international faction of the Panthers traveled throughout Africa to meet with new post-colonial governments. Oliver had joined the extremist wing of the Panther split, a sign of widespread political disorientation in the movement. As spring turned to summer, the organization lost several other crucial members who did not agree with the shift to Puerto Rico. Many of these members left feeling deeply disillusioned that their hard work on local campaigns and on building relationships in the neighborhood has seemingly been for naught. Other experienced members like Carlos Aponte were purged because they were believed to be agents of COINTELPRO, even absent any proof. The case that Aponte was critical of the move to Puerto Rico did not help his case. As discussed previously, the Central Committee began to question his membership months earlier when the New York Times attributed to him an unauthorized quote about Felipe Luciano's demotion. These episodes eroded the sense of sisterhood and brotherhood in the group and amplified distrust and paranoia within the organization's ranks. Still, others who felt a moral commitment to the Young Lords left because they found little to contribute to an organization whose established routine had collapsed. Do we keep going?
Yeah, we still got like 5 more pages to go.
Okay.
Oh, wow. I thought this was the end.
Nope. I just checked and we're going to page 358.
358, okay.
I can finish it.
Please, thank you.
New York offices closed their doors. By June 1971, the East Harlem and Lower East Side offices had closed their doors. The party newspaper Palante continued its regular publication schedule, but the lack of a storefront presence in these Puerto Rican neighborhoods was a painfully obvious metaphor for the Young Lords' retreat from the community at large. The disorientation that befell the Young Lords was certainly exacerbated by the Central Committee's own precipitous decisions. In an interview from the period, Juan Gonzalez attributed the organization's inability to bounce back from its mistakes to the lack of discipline among, quote, many young people in the party who had never worked and therefore did not have the capacity of consistency and patience that we needed in our struggle. While the Young Lords lost many of their more experienced members, they gained newer ones along the way who were politically green. A more experienced and mature membership would perhaps have been able to stay the course and redirect the organization's mission. But the paucity of democratic decision-making across the different levels of membership was a major impediment to their development. However, opening up the organization to democratic debate and discussion will have exposed the Central Committee's grave mistakes and authoritarian tendencies. Moreover, although the Young Lords decided to embrace a working class perspective, the social character of the organization never changed. Beginning in January of 1971, the YLP began to address more seriously the importance of picture.
A badass picture at that.
I love this picture. I love it. Workers in the Revolutionary Project. If greater numbers of workers were to be integrated into the life of the organization, it would have to open up opportunities for involvement that did not mandate a quote 25 hours a day commitment. The 25 hours model of commitment established by the YLP early in its development reflected the organization's strong student and lumpen base. However, unlike students who possess flexibility in their schedules and even the option of leaving school to dedicate themselves to full-time activism, workers who depend on their jobs for survival and to support their families could never conceive of themselves as full-time organizers. In order to attract more workers, the YLP's mass organization committees were designed such that they would not, quote, demand that members spend too many hours in meetings. But absent an infusion of radical workers into the organization who might help change its internal culture and offer a different viewpoint on the challenges of workplace organizing, as the organization became more isolated, the group's, quote, workerist perspective became a whipping post for the infractions of its young students and the lumpen. Very important to know here as well. Of the failure of its members to navigate the mistakes and organizational shifts of the Young Lords, Gonzalez writes during the period, quote, the ideas of humility, collectivity, patience, consistency, hard work principles that we, the working people, have developed were substituted with arrogance, individualism, impatience, inconsistency, and laziness, principles that the capitalists, the rich, the government put in our heads to weaken us. Following its big push to sink roots in Puerto Rico, the organization resurfaced in public life in the summer of 1971 to implement the mass organizations concept that the Central Committee had outlined at the December 1970 retreat. Through these mass organizations, the Lords expected to encourage, quote, the practice of revolutionary self-government among different constituencies in the community. Among Maoists, mass organizations, sometimes known as, quote, people's organizations, were believed to be, quote, the organs of the state before the seizure of power, which would be influenced by a revolutionary organization, in this case, the Young Lords. Despite the quiet demoralization of many, Young Lords members limped along through another massive organizing push. There have been no mass recruitment of workers. In the absence of the significant uptick in revolutionary consciousness they had hoped for, the Young Lords leadership would build looser campaigns in the areas of labor, prisoners' rights, women's rights, housing, and organizing against the Vietnam War. People from the community would discuss issues of concern and plans for action. Within these structures, the Young Lords would offer political education classes, but participation in their mass organizations would not require strict discipline or agreement with the full revolutionary program. The object of this new organizational perspective was to increase direct community participation in YLP-sponsored projects among those who supported the organization but did not possess full revolutionary consciousness or were not ready to commit to full-time membership. This new approach represented a shift in the YLP's founding orientation, which set prohibitively high moral and political standards and expectations for membership that expected members to abandon responsibilities and allegiances to work and family to become full-time organizers. As discussed earlier, the YLP's rules of discipline had previously demanded that Young Lords be on political duty 25 hours a day. In order to accomplish this new mission, By summer of 1971, the YLP began to assign to each of the three branches of the organization in the Bronx, the Lower East Side, and East Harlem, a different area of work within the mass organization perspective. Meanwhile, the Central Committee created 7 mass organizations. The Committee to Defend the Community, which would be dedicated to agitation against the police with the help of young lords who were active in the Bronx branch. The Lumpen Unidos Open Cadenas, or United Lumpen Breaking the Chains, which would be developed in the East Harlem branch. The Workers' Federation, which will operate out of the Lower East Side branch. The Puerto Rican Student Union, college and high school students, which would be based at Hunter College. The Third World Students League, which would consist of junior high school students, though it never got off the ground. The Women's Union, which will operate with the help of the Lower East Side branch. And the new 65th Infantry, which would work with Vietnam veterans and was named after a division of Puerto Rican soldiers in the US Army that first emerged during World War I. In the long run, the group expected to draw in the most politically developed individuals from these mass organizations as full-time members of the YLP. At its best, the logic of these committees was to build activism from the vast majority of the community who were not full-time activists. That potentially large group of people would discuss those issues that resonated with them and would figure out tactics to create the change they desired. Those organic ideas would then be infused with radical leadership, analyses, and critiques. But rather than focus on the 1 or 2 initiatives that would attract the largest number of participants in launching 7 mass organizations, the YLPs overstretched the capacity of its already disoriented membership. The changing political perspective of the group, especially regarding its orientation towards workers, led it to encourage members in the Workers' Federation committees to take jobs in those industries deemed ripe for shop floor activism. The strategy was influenced by the resurgence of working class struggles in the late 1960s and early 1970s against demands for higher productivity on the shop floor. Activism by rank and file workers contradicted a commonly held assumption of the New Left, which suggested that American workers had become a conservative force, lulled by the higher standard of living achieved within a significant section of the working class during American capital's golden years in the 1950s and early 1960s. However, sectors of the working class were growing more radical as a result of the leftward shift in consciousness produced by the civil rights and Black Power movements, growing anger at the rising number of casualties in Vietnam, and finally frustration at the demands for higher worker productivity on the shop floor as employers attempted to offset economic stagnation. In 1968, Black workers in Detroit's auto industry fought against racist hiring practices, automation, and speed-ups, and against a union bureaucracy inattentive to workers' interests. In 1969, there was a resurgence of wildcat strikes. In 1970, workers at General Motors struck for 67 days. Tens of thousands of coal miners struck in 3 states, demanding benefits for miners hurt on the job, and postal workers paralyzed post offices in 200 cities in a legal strike. These developments were short-lived and emerged alongside a conservative backlash against the Black freedom movement and the gains of the 1960s, which influenced white workers. Nonetheless, by 1971, the YLP formed part of a growing trend within the left towards industrializing. The term industrializing is shorthand for a perspective adopted by left organizations that encourage or require members to join the ranks of the working class in strategic industries for the purpose of carrying out political work among workers. Ironically, the strategy was implemented during another big wave of deindustrialization and working class retrenchment. The YLP's transformation away from its exclusive focus on the lumpen and towards the working class did not take place overnight. The group discussed and debated the issues in fits and starts, beginning in the summer of 1970. The YLP's community activism at Lincoln and metropolitan hospitals helped in this transition, especially since the organization had recruited a number of key shop floor activists who belonged to HRUM. Early in 1971, YLP members themselves began to take jobs in public hospitals, where Puerto Ricans and new Africans were heavily concentrated in non-professional health occupations. In addition, the move to Puerto Rico proved to be a turning point for the group. Work on the island clarified for the YLP the meaning of class conflict in the Puerto Rican community, whereas on the mainland, the YLP was able to organize Puerto Ricans with appeals to ethnic identity and by extension to their condition as an oppressed minority group. In Puerto Rico, calls for Puerto Ricans to unite on the basis of national identity and shared oppression were not as effective, whereas most Puerto Ricans in New York shared the same social class. In Puerto Rico, class and race divisions among islanders were sharp, and they often determined perceived interests. As Pablo Yoruba Guzman expressed in an interview with Liberation News Service on the work of the YLP on the island, quote, in Puerto Rico, it is not enough to say, Puerto Ricans, let's get together, because then Governor Ferrer would come to the meeting. Ironically, even though the Young Lords went to Puerto Rico on a nationalist mission, presuming the unity of the island, the experience deepened their understanding of class divisions and thus their working class analysis.
Give me just a second to scroll here and check the page number. Okay, that is where we stop. Which is probably a good thing because hopefully Comrade Shea can be with us on Friday for this section about the Attica prison uprising.
Oh, wow.
He's
Yep, we need him here for this one, okay?
Right, he's our resident expert on this. He was there.
Okay, we need to get his word, okay?
Right. All right, I'm just gonna leave that right there to pick up that on Friday.
That was amazing. I fucking love this chapter.
Oh.
I love that. Also, I just want clarification on something. So whenever they mention the YLO, that's the Chicago Young Lords, and the YLP is sorry, what?
The Young Lords organization is Chicago, and the rest of the chapters, the YLP is the New York chapter.
Gotcha. I just want to know because it can be a little bit confusing sometimes. it could be a little bit confusing. Like one moment they're talking about the YLO, and then they're talking about the YLP. I'm like, wait, what? so I just got a little bit confused there.
Yeah, the YLP. If you see a P, that's New York. If it's O, then it's Chicago and the rest of the chapters.
Gotcha.
Okay, good.
Don't everybody talk all at once.
But yeah.
The calm before the storm.
Right. No pressure. Gather your thoughts.
But that was amazing. Honestly, once again, I really love that distinction that once again they brought up between the YLO and the YLP. Where the YLO, I'm just gonna say Chicago Young Lords because I'm not gonna fucking say YLP YLO.
Let's credit.
Yeah, exactly. It's important that they bring up the distinction between how each one of these organizations were managed. Where the Chicago Young Lords were rightfully so geared to organizing the lumpen, which once again hold the most revolutionary potential among the working class. Once again, the New York Young Lords went away from the lumpen. They did not see the point of radicalizing it, and in other chapters before, they somewhat undermined the Chicago Young Lords for dedicating their time to organizing the lumpen, and that right there is that classist position. Because let's be honest, a lot of the New York Young Lords, especially the Central and even the Central Committee, it seems, held a classist position on the lumpen. They saw them in many ways they took the positions of Marx on them. They saw them as petty criminals that were nothing that had no revolutionary potential. They gave up on them. But once again, the reason why there's so much crime among the lumpen proletariat is because they have been kicked out of the means of production. They are no longer considered exploitable. That's why there's so much crime and impoverishment among the lumpen. And once again, the lumpen have the capability of showing the most reactionary behavior or the most revolutionary behavior.
Right.
It all depends on who gets to them first. That is the deal breaker. That is the deal breaker. The first people that you want on your side is the lumpen, because the lumpen, because while the lumpen have been kicked out, they are on the outskirts
You get to
of
understand
society, and they can see all the cracks of it.
Yeah,
They know
visions.
exactly. They know how these operations work. They have the capability of being the most class conscious people. And once again, the YLP's disregard of them was already one of their major mistakes. And once again, it was classist and it was rooted it was rooted in reactionary sentiments.
Right.
It was rooted in it was rooted in a complete lack of faith of them. And once again, similar to what happened to the Black Panther Party, whereas the Black Panthers started to diverge from their original ideological and political line, which was self-defense and survival programs, but then they started to switch over to reformist tactics, and all of their funds ran out. A similar thing happened with the New York Young Lords, where they were putting all their funds into the Puerto Rican project, and they didn't have enough funds to engage in the organization in the mainland. They had no funds. They were slowly but surely losing membership, losing funds, and putting all of their time on the island while not focusing on the mainland and on their base that they had already established in the first place. And Sister Zen, you were not here before, but in the last chapter, I don't know who it was. I don't know who it was. Shanti, you may be able to remind me, but one of the people in the Central Committee literally denounced the survival programs and called them "quote unquote" volunteerism. That was already a start.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, exactly. They called it volunteerism.
Right?
That like if that ain't fucking revisionist, I don't know what is.
Right. No, volunteerism is a fucking libertarian ideology of basically I have no obligation to my community, and it's just if I fucking feel like doing it.
Exactly.
Whereas Maoism is like, no, we need balance between self-determination and personal autonomy and our obligation to our community to actually care for each other.
Exactly. Exactly. That right there, like them rejecting survival programs and them calling it volunteerism, that was already a big indicator that they were abandoning their ideological and political line and their roots. And once again, as they mentioned here, it seems that the New York young lords were taking the side of Eldridge Cleaver during the split between Huey and Eldridge Cleaver, where Huey became more reformist, where Eldridge Cleaver became more adventurous. He wanted to engage in adventurous behavior, and it seems like the YLP engaged in that same behavior, which to me was what encouraged them to abandon survival programs and try to move their organization to Puerto Rico. So once again, they were abandoning their ideological and political line. They were abandoning their what made their organization work in the first place. They were abandoning the lumpen, and they were slowly but surely revising on dialectical materialism, on Maoism.
Yeah.
Like, it's really fucking sad to see. So yeah.
In both cases, you can see where they lost their sense of fucking balance there and went towards opposing extremes that rendered both ends politically fucking impotent. And
Exactly.
it's like,
Right.
God damn it, but that's something that's important for us to be able to learn from. Comrade
Yeah.
Andy.
Yeah.
Curious to hear your thoughts on
well,
this, bro.
this is really an important chapter, and it's helping me to understand some things. Like I've mentioned an old Puerto Rican friend of mine before, and he had a lot of insights during this period. And one of the things that he said he always puzzled me with was when people came to him with, like, strong Puerto Rican towards the island sentiments, he would say, well, why don't you go there? You're not going there because you have a job here, or you're on Social Security here, or you're on welfare here. You're in the belly of the beast, in other words. So what are you talking about your passion for Puerto Rico when you ain't going back there? When the Puerto Rican diaspora happened, a lot after World War II, let's say, where this, like, a working class was brought here. It was like they were importing the working classes in order to do this work in New York and other places, and that the bourgeois system, the expansion of capitalism and stuff post World War II, could totally put that workforce to work and bring it into the fold. And the people, like, just the fact that they didn't retain Spanish over not even a generation, the kids who were born here didn't learn it. So, like, my friend who was born in Puerto Rico, he came here. He told me that when he was a little boy in the Catholic Church, they separated the Puerto Ricans who were white from the Puerto Ricans who were black. And when he asked his mama, why are we in the basement? She said, because we're black Puerto Ricans. And he abandoned the Catholic Church at that point, became very much the other. So what people might call lumpen or something. But the thing was that the people, the broad mass of people, had to work here. That's what they did. I mean, they, in Puerto Rico, they might have cut sugar cane, but here they were waiting on tables or working in kitchens or doing this and that. And every division that you see, and these divisions still persist in Chicago to this day, big time. You might say they've been smoothed over a little bit, but they're under there. And so when we look at the situation today, we see people desperately trying to become lawyers, professionals, blah, 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 blah. And every time they do, somebody gets ring the bell or whatever, and the whole community is happy that they brought somebody up. My friend tried his whole organizing when Mayor Daley came to him after the Division Rebellion, and he said, "What do you guys want? What the fuck? Why? What's going to make you settle down?" He said, "We need you to reduce the size of the police force." And I've told you all this story before. So Daley didn't want to do it. They eventually did it, and he said that then the Puerto Rican cops were beating on him harder than anybody else. So that we're looking at a history from this perspective we're in today. And we can see that literally nothing is going to work. Nothing's going to work to make capitalism function. Nothing's going to work to ensure the future of this broad mass of people. Nothing. And everything that we tried in the past that was based on ideology, like we had the left or right deviation, but we didn't have the class behind us at any point. Now, I'm suggesting to y'all that the class is ready for us. They are ready for an understanding that puts their class position forward so that they can advance in the face of what? In face of starvation, deprivation, being attacked with drugs and war and this and that and the other thing. They're finally they have no place to turn. There ain't no way out, and that's the point. It's like whether you like it or not, it's like the no way out is the point at which people turn towards a revolutionary solution. Now, to make it to go our way, we're not going to be able to jam on people with ideology from, the last 60 years. Just not going to work. What we have to do is figure out what, and this is what I've been trying to counsel with people about. We have to be the best expression of what the people want. Do they want safety in the streets? Yes. Do they want their children to be safe from predators? Yes. Do they want all the things that they want? We have to advance their demands in the face of a government that's abandoning them and closing down every opportunity. So for the revolutionary, it's almost like a no-brainer. Just get in front of the people, find out what they want, advance that as hard as you can. And I really don't think we have time to change their outlook in other ways at all. We don't have time to do that. I mean, we don't have to tolerate their, racism. We should correct them when that comes up. But in the main, like it was Comrade Africa who shared this thing of some white hillbilly sitting on the porch. His wife asked him, "What do you think of the Roman Empire?" And he said, "I think about it all the time, because that's exactly where we are today. This is a crumbling empire." And the guy went on to explain basically the decline of the Roman Empire. This hillbilly sitting on a porch. I was like, what the fuck is going on in this country? It's a great awakening. It's happened before, but the conditions are such there's a great awakening coming. If we try to hammer it home on the basis of, any preconceived ideologies, we're going to make a left error, right error. It doesn't matter. It won't work. What we have to do is see what the people want, get in front of that, and push that to its only logical revolution, which is communism. That's the only thing that's going to save anybody's ass. So I'm going to shut up, but y'all are beautiful, man. I mean, you're beautiful.
You're beautiful, Andy. You're fucking beautiful.
All fucking
Wow.
power.
You're beautiful.
Exactly what we needed to
All
hear.
fucking power.
All fucking power. It's either survival and revolution or defeat and extinction. Either one.
Yes.
That's the only options we got.
That's it.
That's it.
To speak on what you were listing there as far as like what the people want of like, okay, for women and children to be safe walking down the streets in their own neighborhoods and things like that. Okay. We don't achieve that with more fucking pigs on the street. We achieve that with forming true, genuine connections and bonds with the other people in our communities, getting to know our neighbors, forming genuine friendships with them, and like having each other's backs. We are not fucking.
And we got to demand that we get the resources that we need. Like a lot of people get burnt out. Like I know a lot of people here who start like these charitable activities in the street. They work with the homeless. They work with these kids in these poor neighborhoods, and they get burnt out because they can't solve the problem, no matter how much candy they give away, no matter how many book bags they give away, and nothing solves this fundamental problem. So by educating and then demanding that we go to the alderman, we go to the mayor, and we say, our community needs this. We want it now, or there's going to be trouble for you in more ways than one. And not as a physical threat, but as a like, we're done with your ass. You were done with your ass. You just put the money up that we need, like the abandonment of the west side of Chicago is fucking incredible. It's been that way since 1968 when they burnt it down with Martin Luther King's assassination. Fucking over 50 years, 55 years now. That whole area has been abandoned. They haven't put a lick of work into it. They let the people eat out of the goddamn, nasty ass liquor stores. It's fucked up. Fucked up.
It's so bad. And even going back to what you said about the Puerto Rican cops after the division rebellion, in the words of Assad Shakur, is that justice?
Nope.
It's not justice.
No, it fucking ain't. No, it ain't.
Whether you're getting beat by a Puerto Rican cop, beaten by a black cop, it doesn't matter. You're still getting your fucking ass beat to an oblivion and a bloody mess in the street by a fucking cop.
Right.
That's right.
Bourgeoisie. And this is exactly what I want to go back to in regards to the YLP's adventurous move to Puerto Rican. They did not plan it at all. They just went all out there, not understanding the complex class conditions of the island, especially in regards to the political repression that happened by the US government on the island. They didn't take that into account. They did not prepare themselves. They did not start really learning Spanish to really meet the people, the Boricuas on the island where they were at. And the white wing domination that is still affecting the island to this day, as long as the US is still here, as long as they're still colonized, as long as this empire still exists, as long as they're still a prostitute to the US empire, just like Hawaii, just like Alaska, Guam, Samoa, just like those places, they did not take that into account at all. They just sent 20 people to an island that they probably haven't been on and try to be Superman and stuff like that. Now like I said, I do give them credit for showing them the real faces of the revolution, the Afro-Taino faces, except for the white Puerto Rican petty bourgeoisie that infiltrated the Nationalist Party of Puerto Rico. Come on. That's now something that I can't give them credit for. However, it was a complete misfire on their end.
Well, because they probably didn't realize what they would come up against there of these other parties like that Nationalist Party pretending to be revolutionaries was actually going to be white petty bourgeoisie who were pushing for revisionism that would benefit them in a class manner instead of benefiting the fucking masses.
Right. They did not take that into account at all. And, Denise Oliver joining the BPP literally in the midst of them falling apart because of COINTELPRO, that was a misfire too. Let me just say it. It was a complete misfire. It was just misfire after misfire after misfire. And they tried to do these seven factions that were not even working because their membership was literally going down. It was literally dwindling. They were losing steam, a lot of steam. They just couldn't keep up. They couldn't keep up. Their bourgeois state of mind at that time, it took over. It just took over. They did not care about the lumpen. They only care about it was workers, but not that important lumpen aspect, because it's not just workers. In a revolution, it's not just workers. It's about the people that have been abandoned by capitalism because they were no longer exploitable enough, or their so-called privilege just worn out, and they were abandoned by capitalism, and they went to another people to target and make as exploitable as possible. So that is a big lesson that we should learn, especially to apply to today, especially here in Chicago within these borders, to, for globalization, you need to have organization. And for organization, you need to have decolonization, because the people of Puerto Rico at that time, it wasn't in their mind to start actually embracing their African roots. It wasn't even in the stratosphere at that time. That's what they didn't take into account. It may have been popping for the people on the mainland, but in Puerto Rico, in Borican, it wasn't. It wasn't. It was a lot of class divisions, a lot of warfare against the Afro-Taino Lumpins and workers on the island. They were up against a very dominant European petty bourgeois puppet government that is still in Borican today. And now that it's 2023, everyone can see it. And there's more Boricuas that are now starting to reclaim their Taino roots, that are reclaiming their indigenous African roots. Now that's for today. Back then, that wasn't even the stratosphere for the people on the island, and that's what they didn't take into account. Their bourgeois state of mind just took over. And like I said, it's very, very important to listen to the people and listen to what they want, and then go from there. Just like what Andy said, listen to the people and hear what they want. What do we want? Do we want children? Do we want a environment where there's no sexual violence? And even if there's a strong system of action if it does happen. Like these are the things that we have to take into account here. Like having those systems and listening to the people to what they want, because once again, as we've seen this year, this is not working for anyone, and we already knew the answer to that for a very, very long time. This year was just confirmation that everyone is a target, and that everyone is essentially a lumpin, even some of them that don't even know that they could be a lumpin, or they already are. Right. Listening to the people of where they are at, the proper organization of the masses of the people, just like Kwame Ture said, is very, 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 very integral to this. And the YLP, the New York chapter, they didn't do that. And Cha-Cha would never do that. He would never do that. He would never.
He was lumping.
He was a lumping. He would not do this. That's why Chicago, the Black Panther Party in Chicago and the Young Lords in Chicago, that's why they have such a unique place, because they were fighting through principle and through principled organization and education, not adventurous, dogmatic, bourgeois plight. They did not operate like that, because they knew that it was a class struggle. All of this is a class struggle, and they knew that they had to meet the people where they're at, and that without education, you're literally going to end up like the Weather Underground. That's literally what it was. And just like what Andy said, you have a lot of opportunists here in Chicago, because we haven't had those systems in forever. We haven't had Fred. We haven't had the Rainbow Coalition in forever. So it's like piece by piece by piece. But like I said earlier, people are finally starting to see that there was literally no trying to change any part of this empire. It literally needs to go. And the most important thing to make it where it can be able to come across everyone is the organization of the masses of our people, the lumpen and the workers, and especially the lumpen, because once again, Chicago, the city of the lumpen, is literally political education 101, Chicago, because you get to understand the conditions of the lumpen, how they ended up in those conditions, how the consequences of the worsening conditions of the lumpen, Cabrini Green, the Cabrini Green projects, and how we can learn from that. How can we learn from the YLP's misfire with moving their entire chapter to Puerto Rico? What did they do right? What did they do wrong? Which most things they did do wrong. And how can we apply it to now? How do we apply it to our people today? How do we apply it to the Boricuas on the island and the Boricuas in mainland Turtle Island? Because, you know, this is Turtle Island that we're talking about. So, you know, the so-called US, Canada, and Mexico, because Mexico is a colonial settler state as well. You know, meeting them, meeting everyone at where we're collectively at. And once again, since, you know, a huge revelation like nothing before that we haven't seen in a long ass time, you know, now this is our chance. Now this is our opportunity to really put our boots on the ground and just say that enough is enough and be able to meet each other where we're collectively at towards a communist world, towards a classist world where we're not up in the guillotine by 9 people, where we don't have to worry about, you know, losing our housing, not having, you know, enough of our livelihood affirmed, where we don't have to worry about any of that stuff anymore. And, you know, even still, you know, it still needs to, you know, change with the times, you know, because, you know, even as in a communist society, it do needs to change with the times, obviously. But this current system that we're in is poisoning us. It is killing us. It is literally poisoning our spirits, and it's literally poisoning our minds. And this year, it has shown that you can assimilate all the trans people within these borders and within these borders into being judges, into being lawyers, into being tools of the bourgeoisie, and it will not change a thing. You can literally appoint a Boricua man into being a commissioner of the NYPD, and it will not change a thing because a Boricua man ended up killed a short time after. Like I said, in the words of Asada Shakur, is that justice?
Fuck no, it's not. Never has been.
That's
Which is
it.
exactly what she was trying to highlight with that.
Beautifully said. Beautifully fucking
Comments,
said.
My battery's about shot. I'm gonna say good night. Really got a lot out of it. And so you're doing it on Friday now?
Yeah, tomorrow we'll have the UPM book club reading for
Right.
Seize the Time, but our next segment for this book will be on Friday. Yeah.
Okay, I'll try to be there. Okay, thank you all.
Awesome. Thank
All
you
power to
too.
the people.
All power,
All
comrade.
power.
Thank you for joining us today and for your insights.
Well, thank you for
Comrade
putting
Andy,
up with me.
you did it.
Right on.
Thanks.
All
All
power
right,
to
we
fucking
can
people.
take care, y'all.
Take
And
care.
I want to add on what Shanti May was saying. I want to expand upon that point. That at the end of the day, you have to meet the people where you're at. You have to see what their materialistic conditions and needs are. Because once again, even though, because once again, it does not matter where you are at. It does not matter where you are. That does not erase your roots. The Puerto Ricans in the U.S. are as much Puerto Ricans as the ones in Borican. They are still Puerto Rican, regardless.
Right.
What they did understand, however, was despite that, the materialistic conditions of the Puerto Ricans in New York, in East Harlem, in the Bronx, and so on and so forth, those materialistic conditions and needs are not the same as those in Puerto Rico. They are going to be different. There are going to be different materialistic conditions and different materialistic needs. What they should have done is went to the masses, engage in their materialistic conditions, learn what their needs are, and then provide for those needs and adapt the principles of Marxism, Leninism, and Maoism to those specific materialistic conditions. That's what they should have done out of the get-go. That is what they should have done in the very first place. Among other things, including learning how speak Spanish and not engaging in any adventuristic behavior. And to expand upon that, being a revolutionary, does not involve you going and killing cops. It does not involve you blowing up a police station. It does not involve you assassinating a politician. It does not involve any of that adventuristic bullshit. Being a revolutionary means means being a problem solver. It means solving the issues and problems within your community. Because once again, they have to meet them where they're at. They have to see what they want. Do you need healthcare? Okay, here you go. Do you need need patrols to make you feel safe? Okay, we got you. Do you need education? Do you need food? Provide for their specific materialistic needs. Because once again,
Your way up.
the oppressor needs the oppressed, but the oppressed does not need the oppressor. The moment you make them realize this, the moment you make the oppressed realize that they don't need the oppressor, you don't have to pick up a gun. And the oppressor will attack you because out of anything in the world, they fear that the masses wake up. That's the thing that they fear the most. Out of anything in society, the bourgeois fear the masses realizing that they don't need them. They don't need them. We don't need them. We've never needed them. That's what they fear the most. Prime example of this. When the Black Panther Party was providing free breakfast programs for starving children in new African communities. And the majority of people who came to those breakfast programs were the mothers of such children. The Black Panthers didn't raise guns. They didn't fire at cops. They provided and met the people where they were at materially and psychologically. And what did the pigs do? They went after them. They tried to destroy these programs despite the fact that they were doing nothing wrong. They were feeding starving children. Once the masses saw that contradiction, once they saw how the police were trying to destroy those programs that were feeding their children, when the government did nothing, the Black Panthers didn't have to do anything. The state and the bourgeois exposed themselves. And once they saw that, the masses knew. They knew who was on their side. They automatically knew who was their enemy. The Black Panther Party didn't have to engage in any adventuristic fucking bullshit, because the moment you make these communities self-sufficient, the bourgeois send the pigs. They send the military. They send the state to put the masses back in line. And then, because once again, they hate the masses gaining control over their communities and over their lives. You don't have to engage in any adventuristic bullshit. You don't have to. You don't have to. The bourgeois will expose themselves by you engaging in survival programs. They will expose themselves. They've already exposed themselves. Fucking Ross Baraka.
They've shown who they truly are to us.
Exactly. They've shown it. They've shown who they are. Ross Baraka going on an hour-long rant, demonizing and dehumanizing the new African Black Panther Party. And what have the new African Black Panther Party done? They fed families. They've educated children. They have provided health care for their communities. The masses know. They automatically know. They see how these bastards are acting. They see it. They see what they're doing.
His personal attacks on Comrade Africa are because he's fucking salty that Comrade Africa called him out for taking the side of fucking corporatist, capitalist fucks exploiting the neighborhood and fucking evicting people and making them homeless. And Comrade Africa was standing up for the people, and Ross Baraka wants to fucking pretend to be a revolutionary. That was his whole fucking platform that he ran on, and instead he's getting salty at the actual revolutionaries because he's like, wait, how dare you call me out for taking the side of my corporate buddies who own these fucking rentals?
Like
that's what happened. Once again, fascism is reaction to privilege being threatened. That's what it is. It's a reaction to privilege being threatened. And what did Ross Baraka do after Captain Africa exposed them? He is funding $300 million into a police station
within
that
a
ain't the
A
neighborhood.
militant police training facility.
exactly.
Let's be very
Yeah.
clear. It's not just another cop shop.
Yep.
It is a militant police training facility akin to Cop City that's happening down in Georgia.
It's another cop city. If that ain't fascism, I don't know what is. That's a
Like,
prime example of fascism right there.
It's right in front of you. It's right in front of you. And this is another this is why I say that assimilation is not justice.
Nope.
Because the same people that we want to be so-called represented so bad in these bourgeois entities would not care for us one bit. Because the fact
Nope.
of the matter is, they are opportunistic, they are corrupt, they are violent, and they're literally going out of their way to try to take everyone down they can, anyone they can with them, in the slave factory system, in the workplace, in the housing complexes, anywhere that they can. They are trying to literally take down the people with them. And this is literally what we see. That we have been seeing this for decades. Well, more than decades, really. This is the trillionth time that we've seen this. Mm-hmm. And with the Black Panther Party, when they killed Fred, they got the masses back in line again. It was like a whole standstill, and they brainwashed the masses into not doing anything. And the nonprofits that emerged in Chicago affirmed it. After they killed Fred, they made the masses go back in line. It was like they were brainwashed again.
That was the whole point of it, was to intimidate people out of doing basic fucking, community activism and serve the people programs of, like, if you start feeding your neighbors, we're gonna fucking kill you, just like we did Chairman Fred.
It was
that was the whole point.
It was literally out of fear. It was a matter out of fear, and we see the results. We see what happened with Chicago after they killed Fred. Like, it was literally devastating to everyone. The Africans, the Chicanos, the Boricuas, the Appalachian migrants, every single person that was being awakened by Fred and the Rainbow Coalition, their rising messiah was gone now. And now they had to go back in line and now be just like everyone else. And this coincides of what they talked about, the rise of conservatism, the plight to become white, for new Africans to become Black Americans, African Americans, for Chicanos to become Mexican American, which is code for white. Just like what the Spaniards did to their ancestors to make them so-called mixed, to denounce their native identity, to denounce their African roots if they have any. It's literally the same thing.
Forced assimilation.
Forced assimilation.
That's what it is.
And also in South Lawndale, it's got its name Little Village because, once again, they were brainwashed that if they assimilate, then they did not have to be on the side with the African struggle anymore, that they could have their own Raza village. And that was where the name came from, Little Village, because it's an assimilationist name for South Lawndale, for those native people in there. And so, like, that important aspect too, like, so many of us have been so assimilated that once again, we don't know who we are. So we have to meet them where they're psychologically at, especially with Cubans in Florida, where they've been so stripped of their roots that they don't know that they're Cuban. They're Cuban, but they're psychologically European.
Exactly. I hate that. I fucking hate that. I've talked to you about this before, Shanti, but I see it all the fucking time. I have seen Cubans in my school literally burning their Cuban passports, hating themselves because they're Cuban. It's fucking disgusting. Like it
Right.
genuinely pisses me off. It just
That,
genuinely fucking pisses me off.
that,
Like I hate seeing them like this. I hate seeing my people like this. I hate seeing them feel miserable about who they fucking are.
right.
Because that's what the bourgeois oftentimes do. They make them, not only do they make them assimilate to being quote unquote American, which is just white, but they make them feel bad about who they actually are. They
Who we
fucking
are.
demonize them and belittle them for who they actually are and for what their roots actually are. They demonize them. They dehumanize them. They make them look at where they came from as something that they should be disgusted at.
As they should be disgusted. And another example was Chicago, the Daley family. Guess where their ancestral kin is from?
Ireland.
Irish. From the potato famine. Daley's parents came from the Great Potato Famine in Ireland, made possible by the colonialist, imperialist English bourgeoisie. And he had such hatred against his own roots, against being Irish, that he literally had the CPD and other tools of the bourgeoisie in Chicago treat Scottish and Irish Appalachian migrants in Uptown the same way that they were treating Chicanos, the same way they were treating the Chinese migrants, the same way that they were treating new Africans when we came up here. The exact same way. And even in the first Rainbow Coalition movie, the CPD were beating those people every single day, every hour, every second, for any reason whatsoever. And they were locking them up for any reason whatsoever. They were being treated the exact same way. They were seen the exact same way. Daley targeted his own people too. He targeted his own people too because of that plight for assimilation. And Bridgeport, where he's from, there's so much assimilated Irish in Bridgeport. It's literally disgusting. Proud Boys, Irish people as Proud Boys, how violent, how ignorant can they be against their own identity, against who they actually are? But that's what the bourgeois want. They want to make them as socially, politically, and economically and culturally exploitable as possible until the wheels fall off. That's exactly the case with Puerto Rico. They want Puerto Ricans or Boricuas to become so-called white, to literally deter them from their African roots, from their Taino roots, just like how they did the so-called Dominicans, just like how they did the Cubans. You see the result. And the fact of the matter is, they make it their mission to literally force us to become just like everyone else. Exactly in the case of Fred, they literally scared the masses and brainwashed them once again, because there was no system anymore to show them what the real enemy was. They became assimilated. And look at where we ended up at, because they took an integral figure, an integral revolutionary faction that no one had ever seen before. Appalachian migrants, New Africans, and Boricuas together in the most segregated city within these borders. They had never seen anything like that before. Young people in the most segregated city within these borders coming together and being able to pull the masses together the way that they were doing up until Fred's assassination, they never seen anything like that before, and that's exactly what they fear. They fear the awareness of unity. They are afraid of the awareness of the people's destiny. That is what woke being it. That's what being woke is. It's not about this neoliberal crap. It's about understanding your oppressor. Being woke means being aware of the conditions in which you are in via the bourgeois system. Being woke means that you can become a lumpen next. That is what being woke is. And now that, they have shown what our revolutionary elders, what our ancestors have been telling us for years at this point, now that more people are seeing what this empire truly is in its full glory for everyone to see. See, that's a good thing about, all these technological advancements. We get to see the state in action, what they do to the people. You see on YouTube, channels dedicated to class warfare against the lumpen with body cams by the police to show them it literally means of intimidation and so-called entertainment. Violence against lumpen people, against proletariat people for the whole internet to see, because they want them to see. They want them to see what they do. They want them to see their dominance in action right in front of our eyes. That's why they're popping out, because they want them to see their true colors. That it was never the lumpens doing. It was never the proletariats doing. It's the bourgeois system's doing. And now that more people are starting to see that 2020 was a big, big, big mistake, and all the other elections, that they're now starting to see that a new world is definitely possible, that they don't have to live this way, that our land does not have to be poisoned by these imperialist factions, and we don't have to embrace these identities that only exist under a class system. Under a communist system, it's literally the community again. But until we can get there, we have to meet each other where we're at. Because just like what Fred Hampton said about the importance of revolutionary education, if we do not do the education and decolonization aspect, because education and decolonization are very, very important into reclaiming who we truly are and how we can work towards a new, free, classless world. This is what we have to do. It's a process. It cannot happen in a moment.
It's protracted.
It's protracted. Like the
protracted. Protracted.
LA riots, that was a moment. That was a reaction. That was a reaction because they had enough. It was largely lumpen Africans and Chicanos that, just had enough. It was a moment of emotion that just bottled up into this big moment. And then it did not go beyond that. It stopped. That's why
they were standing up against police brutality and only got met with more police brutality.
Police brutality and more repression by the LAPD and other factions. Just like Kwame Ture said, there's a difference between mobilization and organization.
Major difference.
Mobilization, organization. A big, big difference.
Mobilization creates a moment. Organization creates a movement. That's the difference.
You
That's
create
a major difference. Exactly. Theory and praxis needs to be one. It needs to be
Any
together.
time.
You can theory, once again, theory without praxis is willful in action, but praxis without theory is unorganized anger. The LA riots, they were praxis without theory. They were unorganized rage and anger, rightful rage and
Yes.
anger. And
Right.
our goal as revolutionaries is to turn that rightful rage and anger into organized revolutionary acts. That's what we need to do. That's what we need to do.
Into principle.
Exactly.
It needs to become principled.
Political and principled. That's what needs to happen. That's what needs to happen.
Political. We cannot, once again, I've said this many, many times, we cannot keep relying on our culture to, liberate us. You can't do that. Cultural people have to become political, like how Nani K. Trask said. Cultural people need to become political. Our culture needs to be the core of our anger, the core of our resistance, the core of revolution. It cannot be, a dogmatic bookshelf.
It can't. It needs to be used as a strategy of a whole to achieve revolution. Culture by itself cannot achieve revolution. Same way how each one of these strategies, mass line, survival programs alone, they cannot achieve revolution. But combined, if they are used in tandem with one another, if these strategies are implemented to the unique materialistic conditions of our communities, and they are done principally, disciplined, and if we meet the people where they're at psychologically and mentally, if we educate them, if we elevate them, then it can be used for revolution. It can be more.
It can be more bigger than that, and that's the lessons that we should learn from the YLP's misfire, trying to be all bold and be
adventurous.
Whole operation to to their homeland, their ancestral homeland, Bordican.
Which is right. It was like once again, them wanting to go back to their homeland to radicalize their fellow kin. That's not wrong. It's just their actions.
It was just the way that they went about it. Like, once again, there's nothing wrong with that at all. Like, there's literally nothing wrong with that. It's more so how
they did it. That's what was wrong.
How do you do it?
They engaged in adventurous, idealistic action instead of principled action, because once again, they should have just formed a chapter in there. That's what they should have done. They should have just formed a chapter in Puerto Rico instead of wanting to move there.
Yeah, and like I said, the volunteerism part that we read about yesterday, that literally came out of left field for me. Like,
exactly.
I didn't even hear. I never heard of that word before until they, broke it down, the author, and it was like, how the hell did we go from the Lincoln Hospital to now volunteerism? Was
exactly.
the volunteerism was literally meeting the people in the hospital in the community where they're at volunteerism now?
Because they said yesterday, they literally said that not to paraphrase what the person who said it was volunteerism, again, I forgot who it was. I think it was Gonzalez. I think it might have been them. I don't remember, but they literally said that the most important thing in meeting the people, it's meeting their political needs and not just dealing with the effects, the quote unquote effects of capitalism. And they describe the effects of capitalism, quote unquote, as hunger and starvation, so on and so forth. The problem with that is that if you want to meet the people politically, you first have to meet them materially and psychologically. The whole reason, once again, how the hell are you gonna meet them politically if they don't yet know if they can trust you or not? How are you gonna meet their political need if you have not yet built that connection with them?
Built trust. That system
exactly.
Because you
Exactly.
need
But there's a
Yeah.
disconnect that speaks to even the history of libertarianism, because they left out the other half of the ideology. The term was originally coined by Marx as libertarian socialism, which means that literal balance between your autonomy and self-determination and your obligation to care for your community, therefore bringing together libertarian and socialism as one ideology. And modern day libertarians have completely cut away the socialism facet of it, because they're like, why should I fucking care? I need to only give a fuck about myself and my,
Yeah.
like core family of, my spouse, my kids. And if I feel like fucking volunteering for something, then cool. Let's just hope enough people fucking volunteer
And then
to
we
do
move on.
it within the community, because they wanted to fucking, not recognize that social obligation to give a fuck about your entire village, not just what's under your own fucking roof.
The
And
village.
the problem there is if people don't have that sense of obligation to their fucking community, then they become what? Individualistic in a
Yep.
toxic ass
Individualist. It's
fucking
literally
manner.
individualism in a
Yep.
handbasket.
Individualism.
It's individualism in a handbasket.
Literally. Like, and again, to go back what they said, if you want to meet the people ideologically, if you want to make the masses have an ideological and political line, you first have to build that connection and show that you give
care.
a fuck about them,
that you care
about them, that you're willing to die for them, that you're willing to struggle alongside them. Once again, to go back to what Huey said, before you run, you walk, and before you walk, you crawl. You have to meet them where they're at. You can't just expect the masses to learn how to run when they're still crawling. You can't.
You can't go all out. And that's
Exactly.
also another point of it too, because I did not know that volunteerism was even co-opted. I
didn't know either.
I didn't even know that. And that shows you how capitalism co-opts proletariat ideology.
Yep.
It's literally revisionism. It's literally become a revisionist term, especially since, like, you see all these, so-called radical collectives and organizing groups. 99% of them, they don't even practice that. They don't even They don't even practice actual theory into practice. They don't know what Mao actually is. They don't know what the third world struggle actually entailed in their material conditions, for Angolan women in Angola, Mozambican women in Mozambique, Zimbabwe women in Zimbabwe, Ghanaian women in Ghana. Like, it's like they don't have that. They don't practice that. And that's the biggest pitfall, is that it's out of reaction, not principle.
Yep. You want to know what
principle?
Reaction. You want to know what the bourgeois? Sorry.
It's literally that. Once again, all these organizations, these so-called radical collectives, they don't do that.
They don't. They really don't. You want to know another thing that bourgeois ideology also co-opted? You want to know what else?
What?
Social democracy. That's another thing that the bourgeois ideology co-opted, because in Lenin's time, social democracy sounded exactly as it meant. Democracy under a social society. That's all it meant. That is all it meant during Lenin's time and during the Bolsheviks. But after that point, it started to become co-opted, and its socialist roots started to be abandoned until we have social democracy of today, which is basically just capitalism, but with a smiley face on it. capitalism, but with better social welfare. That's basically it. That's all it is now.
That's literally it. And, especially also with direct democracy, having, autonomous systems, autonomous communist systems of community is very, very important. Communism means community is literally it. So
in the name, it's in the fucking name. It's not when people steal your fucking toothbrush. it's not when people go to your fucking house and say, fuck you, I'm gonna take your car. Like, no.
Like, that's literally
there's a difference between personal property,
and
which
private
is your
property.
home, your car, your toothbrush, your clothes, versus private property, which is the means of production, like the factory that you fucking work at, that everyone who works there should have a partial ownership over, not there being this little core group of fucking CEOs and whatnot and board members who are the owners and everybody else just being employees.
It literally is not how that works. And studying these systems of direct community is very, very crucial. And that's once again, that's also what we can learn from the YLP's misfire with Puerto Rico, meeting the people where they're at, establishing that trust, establishing that system of love for the people, and meeting them where they're at psychologically, materially speaking, politically speaking, and, not making it adventurous and dogmatic and just jumping all the integral steps because, once again, because, we do have a few minutes left, but, once again, making it principled, but not where you're trying to scare the people off. And that's one of the lessons that we can learn from this fire.
Absolutely. And on the psychological tip, one thing that needs to be highlighted too is a lesson that we can learn from both the original Panthers and the original Young Lords, because there's another parallel here that became exploitative of this expectation that you be doing revolutionary work around the fucking clock and then some, and fuck if you get any rest, fuck if you get any time to just be a fucking human being and do anything,
it's unrealistic,
enjoyable. Of like, no, you should be boots to the ground 25 hours a day.
All the time.
Destroys yourself psychologically. You have to fucking take care of your mental health, and you're not doing that if you are doing nothing but working around the clock, whether that be working at a fucking wage job or be working revolutionarily. That is still overtaxing yourself. You are still a fucking human being. You still need time to rest. You still need time to just interact with your family, with your community, in manners of like, okay, I need some fucking fun time.
I need time, okay? That's literally that capitalist model too.
Exactly.
They were students. They are not of a lumpen background, so it kind of correlates with each other. That 25-hour a day BS that would not work today at all.
Fuck no, and that's why we don't do that today.
Absolutely not.
That's one thing. When speaking with Elder Comrade Aaron Dixon from the original Black Panther Party,
which is amazing.
Was one thing where he commended us and was like, I give y'all props because the younger generations know how to take better care of our mental health than they did back then, and to actually give ourselves time to just exist, and aren't pushing this delusional idea of work around the clock and fuck if you even get 2 hours of sleep a night, because that is part of what made these parties fall apart. Is people were overextended, overworked, and had no fucking energy left. That's why they were losing membership. That's why they were losing that motivation and their ability to grow, because people were burnt the fuck out.
It was like boots to the ground, boots to the ground, boots to the ground. But I cannot have time to just, be a human and, live. Because, it's once again that capitalist model that they had.
Exactly.
It did not work. It did not work. It did not
never
work.
worked.
It wasn't going to work. And that's why it imploded, because no young person, come on, a 16-year-old cannot work 25 hours around the clock,
Hell
being
no.
Nobody can.
no
Hell
one
no.
can.
Hell no. Nobody can do that.
Yeah.
Can do that shit.
Yeah.
Once again, when it comes to our comrades and the people that we love, and I love both you, Sister Zen, and you, Shanti. When it comes to those that we love and that we care about, when it comes to our comrades, like I've said before, it's not just revolutionaries that are alongside you. To have comrades isn't just to have revolutionaries alongside you. It's to have a support group. It's to have people that you can connect with. Because once again, while friend and comrade are not interchangeable, you can have comrades that are your friends. You can have comrades that you connect with, that you can have fun with, that you can talk about random stuff, that you can have interests in. Being a revolutionary does not mean that you have to be the soulless husk and you gotta serve the people 100%. Because once again, there is a difference. There is a difference between self-care and individualism. There is a major difference between self-care and individualism. To take care of your physical, emotional, and mental well-being is 100% valid as long as you're not doing it at the expense of others. If you're not doing it at the expense of others, it is 100% valid. Being individualistic and wanting to take care of yourself, to actually take care of yourself and make sure that you are fucking okay and that you can actually provide not just for your community but for yourself, so that we don't collapse. That's valid. There's nothing wrong with that.
It's very
The flip
valid.
of that, the flip side of that coin is also true, that you can't do so much work only for other people to the point of harming yourself too.
Exactly.
And still expect to be functional, still expect to be any good for yourself or anybody else.
Right.
There's a balance. There's a balance.
Do fun things. I want to do fun things. I want to go to the lake. I want to go to the beach. I want to, just walk around.
Play video games.
Play video games. I want to make music.
We're humans.
Right. We're not robots. Okay.
We got to combat that way of thinking, because once again, socialism, the whole point of building a social society is to build a society where we are treated as what we are, human beings. That's the whole point of socialism. To have a society where we are not cogs in a machine, where we are not tools that can be exposed, that can be tossed aside and discarded. We are human fucking beings. We are not tools. We are not cogs in a machine. And socialism, the entire point of it is to treat us of what we actually are. Because at the end of the day, we are an intercommunal species. We've always been an intercommunal species, and it is only capitalism that has divided and alienated all of humanity so fucking much that not only are we disconnecting with our culture, not only are we disconnecting with ourselves as nations, we're disconnecting with ourselves as a fucking species because of capitalism. That's what's happening.
Right. And we deserve each other. We deserve to have fun. That's literally the whole point of being a human. We deserve to protect and serve each other and have fun.
And be happy.
And be happy.
People often ask those questions of like, what's the purpose of life? What's the point? Why are we here? The answer to all of those types of existential questions is connection. God damn it.
Yep.
Connection with each other, connection with nature. That's the fucking answer. Connection. That's why we are here. Connection.
That's what we're talking.
To connect. To connect. Once again, to live as a community. To live as a community in commune. In harmony. with one another.
We are community. We are communists. We are for the community, by the community,
Exactly.
within the
If you are, as Chairman Zulu said, if you're afraid of revolution, you're afraid of yourself. If you are
That was
afraid,
Chairman Fred.
oh, sorry.
No, I can pretty much
For
guarantee
real.
you Chairman Zulu has quoted Chairman Fred on that one, but yeah, that was originally Chairman Fred. If you were afraid of socialism, you're afraid of yourself, because socialism
Exactly.
is the people.
Exactly. And if you hate socialism, you hate yourself and the people. To hate socialism, because at the end of the day, you know what revolution means, y'all? You know what it means at the end of the day? All revolutionary means is moving human development forward. That's all it means.
The
That is
people.
all it means.
Moving
That is
the
all
people.
it means. That's all it
Moving the
means.
people.
Because once again, on a historical level, how have we transitioned from each socioeconomic system? When the bourgeois replaced feudalism with capitalism, did they ask the feudal lords politely if they can give up their little power and if they can vote? No, they rebelled. They took them over. And when the feudal lords replaced slave societies with feudalism, did they ask did they ask the slave societies if they could please replace them? No, they rebelled. They revolted.
Pretty please.
Please, can you please take take over your power, please? Like no.
As Comrade Sister Asada said, you can't fucking ask your oppressor to please stop oppressing you. That ain't how shit works.
It never works. Human history is class struggle. They're one and the same. They are one and the fucking same. All of human history is composed of class struggle. All of human history is composed of two classes, the oppressor class and the oppressed class. And these two classes compete and combat against each other until one replaces the other and a new superstructure is formed. A new socioeconomic system is formed. The capitalists, the bourgeois were revolutionary for their time. The feudal lords were revolutionary for their time. The slave societies were revolutionary for their time. Right now, socialism is what's revolutionary. And after that, communism is what's revolutionary. And whatever's after that, that'll be revolutionary.
I'm telling you, y'all need to listen to my mother for real. Like y'all need to listen to my auntie for real, because this is like real shit. Like
there's 101. There's 101 people.
For real. Like y'all need to listen to her.
Have you heard of Jesus?
Read her book.
Have you heard of Jesus?
Right. The motherfucker beat the shit out of capitalists, going, how dare you financially exploit people? And he told everybody, be fucking kind to each other, feed and clothe and heal your neighbor. God damn it.
Like, have you heard of him? Have you heard of Jesus? Have you heard of him?
Fine.
Oh, goodness. It's beautiful shit. On that note, though, we are pushing 3 hours now. So we gotta wrap this shit up. Not to mention my lumpen proletariat disabled ass needs to get the fuck up and stretch because my pinched nerves are screaming at me. So thank you all for all of your contributions tonight. I love hearing you ladies' thoughts. Sean, if you got anything to throw in here before we end this, by all means, bro, take the mic.
Come on, Sean. Come on, Sean.
No pressure.
Come on, Sean.
I see you sitting over there, and I'm like,
I'm pretty sure you guys fully handled it today. Like, Jesus. Well done.
Indeed.
Thank you. We tried.
We're all revolutionary. And once again, to say one last thing, have y'all heard of our Lord and Savior, Sasha Carr? Have you heard of her? She's amazing. Oh, fucking hell. If I ever have kids, I'm going to tell them that Ho Chi Minh was Jesus. That's what I'm going to do. I'm going to tell them that Ho Chi Minh was Jesus Christ. Oh,
crazy
my God.
We have each other.
Each other. each other. Yo, I fucking love you guys so much. I love you, Sister Zen. I love you, Shanti. I love you, Sean. I love every single last one of you guys. Mwah.
I love y'all for real. Like y'all, like we're real here. We keep it real here. So like
we're materialists. We keep a material with everyone.
Let's be specific. We are dialectical materialists.
Dialectical
See, if you
materialists.
just say we're materialists, that could be conflated for capitalist materialism.
Material girl.
And that we are not. We are dialectical materialists.
We are
understand
dialectical.
the material needs that need to be met for everyone to have a dignified fucking life. And therein lies the biggest difference between us and capitalists, because they don't give a fuck about anybody but themselves having any goddamn dignity.
Exactly. Preach.
that is it.
Always. You know, I got sass and my mouth's on fire at all fucking times. God damn.
Right on.
I love you guys. Y'all have a beautiful evening.
All right.
Thank you for tonight, and I can't fucking wait to dive back into Seize the Time tomorrow.
All powered up people.
All
power. All revolutionary power and love, y'all. All revolutionary power and love.
All power.
Yes. Y'all have a beautiful night.
Y'all too. I love you, sisters, and
love you too, Gabby.